Chapter 9, 32. Clive Crumb was undoubtedly a proud young man, but that didn't mean he was stupid. On the contrary, having received an elite education since young, he understood the important role of submission and compromise in political struggles. However, as a member of the Griffin Knights, he couldn't accept the death of the great leader and all the official members, nor could he accept that the nobles were disbanding the knights. Without the guidance of the adult griffins, the remaining hatchlings would find it difficult to learn how to fly, hunt, and cooperate with the knights. It would take decades or even centuries for them to become a fighting force. It was clear that with Bakarov City's current terrible situation, there was no time to rebuild an elite army that couldn't participate in battle. It was these repeated blows that made Clive Crumb lose his rationality, and he wanted to vent his dissatisfaction through cursing. However, seeing Zack's ashen face, he suddenly realized that he didn't have the right to be angry at anyone. He froze on the spot, not knowing what to say. Just as the two were silently staring at each other, a beautiful figure suddenly appeared at the end of the corridor. She wore a white dress that symbolized purity, and with her silver hair and delicate facial features, she instantly gave off an indescribable beauty. "Miss Rowling, why are you here?" Clive hurried to greet her, asking nervously. The girl patted her chest lightly, trying to steady her breathing before answering. "I saw you angrily run out and was a bit worried, so I followed you." Clive's face immediately reddened, and he explained awkwardly, "I'm very sorry to have made you worry. I heard that a fleet killed all the official members of the Griffin Knights, and they're still attacking the docks. I couldn't help it, so you came to make a scene at the council? Who gave you such authority? And who made you think you have the right to do so?" Before he could finish his sentence, Rowling glared at him and questioned him. It was clear that this young lady with elven blood was angry, and her fair face was covered in frost in a few seconds. I'm sorry. I really don't want the Griffin Knights to be disbanded, and I don't want to see my hometown fall under the feet of the enemy." Clive's eyes began to redden as he spoke, looking very agitated. General Zack sighed softly and said to the angry half-elf girl, "Miss Rowling, it's all right. I can understand his impulsiveness. After all, the hot-bloodedness of youth is the backbone of this city. As long as they have the strength to curse at us, it means that Bakarov City is beyond redemption. Perhaps one day, when no one curses at us anymore, this city will truly be finished. Your wisdom and tolerance is admirable. Please allow me to express my sincerest apologies. Rowling's ants? If there's nothing else, I'll be taking my leave. Right now, the city is very chaotic, so it's best that you don't walk around casually. Otherwise, if you encounter a large number of mobs, who knows what they will do? General Zax. But before he TSSS. Please wait a moment. If you don't mind, can you take us with you? Take you with me? Zack stopped in his tracks, a puzzled expression on his face. Why? Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but the person I'm about to meet is the infamous Flaming Duke. He's not a normal person. He's a complete destroyer and madman. No, Sir General, my point of view is the exact opposite. Not only is he not a madman, he's also very intelligent and rational. Think about it. Would a madman choose to meet an envoy? Would he choose to reopen negotiations after the first round of attacks achieved extraordinary results? In fact, all of this was his plan from the start. Even if I don't know the reason, I can see that he doesn't want to kill too many people, so you haven't lost all your bargaining chips. As long as you're willing to take me with you, I can help this city obtain some favorable conditions. Rowling glanced at Clive, who was secretly wiping his tears out of the corner of her eye. On one hand, she didn't want her guardian knight to have any regrets, and on the other hand, she didn't want to lose Bakarov City, a human city that was naturally close to the elves. After all, the famous Griffin Knights had been established with the help of the Elven Royal Palace hundreds of years ago. Every once in a while, the elves would even transport some rare goods, such as sugar, spices, and so on to maintain the friendship between the two parties. As a veteran general, Zack wasn't stupid at all. After hearing this analysis, he immediately realized what a huge mistake he'd made. Without any hesitation, He bowed to the half-elf. "Miss Rowling, thank you very much for your reminder. I now formally invite you to join the envoy group and become the representative of the negotiations. We don't have extravagant hopes that you'll be able to obtain good conditions. We only hope that the other party can fulfill their promise and allow Bakarov City to avoid this calamity." Rowling smiled and nodded. "Of course, General. This is my goal as well. May our friendship last for a long time." Saying this, she extended her slender arm. May our friendship last forever. As this proverb passed down among the elves, General Zack also reached out his right arm to hold her small hand. As everyone knew, elves were a race with a very long lifespan, with a lifespan of 600 to 800 years. Some exceptional cases could even live up to 1,000 years. In their view, friendship was the product of time. It took decades and centuries to establish a relationship of trust. Thus, as the envoy of the Elven Court, Rowling hoped to preserve Bakarov City, the only foothold in the southern seas. Similarly, General Zack also hoped to increase the pressure on Andre through her special identity as an elven girl, so as to better ensure the safety of the city. After all, the elves had already established several glorious ancient empires before the humans had even walked out of the caves and established their civilization, especially their unique magic skills. Even today, when magic was extremely declining, they still had the ability to easily destroy one or two human kingdoms. Just like this, 2 more members joined the envoy group. Under the escort of the guards, they rowed a small boat towards the Eye of Arcane docked in the bay. Not long after, they once again boarded the deck and were received by Andre. Chapter 9:33. Please tell me, what's your answer? Andre didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. He'd already given the other party enough time to consider, so he had to get a definite answer. Otherwise, he'd be seen as weak and easily bullied. In this world where the strong preyed on the weak, the victors didn't need to show any mercy to the losers. In some places where the people were valiant, massacres were commonplace, not to mention that he'd only destroyed half of Bakarov City. General Zack took a deep breath and replied with certainty. "Our answer is that we accept your conditions, but the lady behind me will be responsible for discussing the details with you." "Lady?" Andre frowned subconsciously and looked behind him, immediately noticing the only female in the group. It couldn't be helped. Rowling's appearance was just too eye-catching. Whether it was her long silver hair or her pointy ears, it was obvious that she wasn't an ordinary human. "It's you." Andre stood up in surprise. "Why are you among the envoys from Bakarov City?" Rowling took 2 steps forward with light and graceful steps and bowed. "Good evening. It's nice to meet you again. I'm also very surprised. I didn't expect that in just a few days, you have already become the great fire elemental prince, Aesop Desser's chosen in the material world. Can you tell me why you attacked Bakarov City and even threatened to destroy it?" Andre shrugged nonchalantly as he gazed at the beautiful half-elf. "Of course, but it's a long story. If you don't mind, you can sit down and we can talk over supper. After all, Bakarov City has already agreed to my conditions, so we have plenty of time." After saying that, he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The ship's cook quickly brought a chair and 2 trays. The trays were filled with fragrant snacks and drinks. "It's an honor to receive your invitation. It would be impolite of me to decline." Rowling politely bowed and sat on the chair with her knees bent. She picked up the cup and took a sip of the steaming mint tea. She looked extremely relaxed and did not look like she was here to negotiate at all. As for Clive Crom, he followed closely behind and didn't hide the hatred on his face. He glared fiercely at Andre as if he wanted to swallow him whole. With Andre's current identity, status, and strength, he obviously didn't need to care about a mere trainee knight. Hence, he turned a blind eye to it. Even the magical equipment that he had taken from the Griffin Knights was still placed on the deck, and he had no intention of letting them be put away. After sitting down again, he took a sip of his drink to moisten his throat. He pointed at the warship docked at the harbor and said, "In fact, the reason why I want to take revenge on Bakarov City is because they joined forces with my enemy and attacked first. I almost lost my life in that ambush. If not for the Raging Flame God's approval, I might not have been able to sit here and drink tea with you. Just like the saying goes, behind every choice lies a consequence that must be borne. If I die, then there will be no consequence. But if I don't die, then they will have to pay a heavy price. When it comes to dealing with my enemies, I don't want to leave any future troubles behind. So, they can either submit to me obediently and become qualified vassals, or they will become history, just like all the cities that were destroyed by the Duke of Flame. You damned bandit, scoundrel, rogue, you were the one who attacked our merchant ship first. Before Rowling could speak, Clive Crom, whose brain had been dominated by anger, couldn't help but jump out and roar furiously. He, who had always had an excessive sense of justice, couldn't tolerate Andre's rogue logic of only allowing him to attack and not allowing him to take the initiative to attack. Ha ha! Do you know, dear Sir Knight, there's a saying in my hometown that the truth is only within the range of cannons. Cannons were the weapons used to attack the harbor just now. There's also another saying that history is written by the victors. So, whether you call me a bandit or a scoundrel, it doesn't matter. Because many years later, the historical records will only mention that the foolish ruler of Bacaro City angered the Flaming Duke and brought disaster and destruction to the entire city. As for the reason behind this, they don't care at all. Andre laughed as he spoke of the so-called truth of history. Especially in this primitive and barbaric world, people usually only worship the strong. Those who occupied a larger space in history books were often not those wise kings, but those cruel conquerors and executioners. It couldn't be helped. The innate desire of humans drove them to desperately climb up and obtain more wealth, population, land, and women. But in order to obtain these, they had to snatch it from the hands of others. No matter how much human society evolved, this gene of plunder would never fade. At most, it would hide and wait for an appropriate time to completely erupt. Clive Crom was so angry that he couldn't speak. His whole body was trembling nonstop. One of his hands was already on the hilt of his sword, ready to draw it out and start a duel at any time. But just as he was about to lose control, the silent Rowling suddenly reprimanded, "Clive, back down. If you don't want to cause trouble for your hometown, then apologize to me immediately. Hurry up and apologize. Clive, do you want to see the city burn in flames?" General Zack also anxiously reprimanded loudly. Looking at the young man's eyes that were mixed with anger and fear, Andre smiled and waved his hand. "Forget it, no need. I forgive his rudeness. After all, integrity is also a good quality, although the way he expressed it was a bit stupid." Seeing that Andre wasn't angry, General Zack instantly let out a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that the other party would tear up the agreement in anger and brazenly attack the entire city. It must be known that in Oraire, there was no idea that a superior couldn't launch a retaliatory attack because of anger. On the contrary, since human civilization entered a feudal society, more than 90% of the wars escalated from small conflicts. For example, there was a king in the East who felt that he was humiliated at a banquet in another country. After returning, he didn't say anything and brought people to fight back. As a result, the childish war lasted for a full 30 years until his death. Since then, the two countries that were originally friendly neighbors became mortal enemies. Even now, small-scale conflicts often occurred. Chapter 9:34. Casually brushing aside the small unpleasantness created by Clive Crom, Andre shifted his attention back to the half-elf female sitting opposite him with a slightly playful gaze. After a long while, he smiled and said, "Miss Rowling, since you intend to negotiate with me on behalf of Baccarov City, shouldn't you reveal your identity?" Rowling smiled and took out an exquisite pendant made of dozens of sapphires from her snow-white chest. She took it off and gently placed it on the table. Then, she replied in an unhurried tone, "Of course. My full name is Rowling Amagir, the messenger of the elven court from the depths of the distant ocean." Amagir? The gemstone flower family, with 12,000 years of glorious history? Andre glanced at the pendant on the table and raised his eyebrows in surprise. In many ancient books, Amagir, the gemstone flower family, was mentioned many times. This was because they had played an important role in the history of the elves, especially the 5 marriages with the royal family. Their influence on the elven court was unparalleled. They could be called the nobles of nobles. It couldn't be helped. Perhaps among the human nobles, a family with 1,000 years of history was considered to have a long history and was praised by countless scholars. However, to the elves who had a long lifespan, it was only a matter of 1 or 2 generations. It wasn't even worth mentioning. That's right, the gemstone flower family. My father is Alamir Amagir, the second highest male in the family. My mother is a noble from Cook Island. As you can see, I'm a half-elf. I grew up in the elven court and received a complete elven noble education. Now, I'm walking in the human world as an emissary. Rowling seemed to be very proud of her elven identity. Her words always revealed a hint of pride, as if the other half of her human blood didn't exist at all. But this was to be expected. Ever since the ancient magic civilization was destroyed by the gods, the entire continent of humans was just like Earth, where Europe degenerated from the ancient Roman Empire to the Dark Middle Ages. Meanwhile, the elves in the distant seas were just like a huge empire that unified East Asia. In their eyes, all humans were considered uncivilized barbarians. In fact, not to mention the elven nobles from the gemstone flower family, even the wild elves who chose to stay on the continent generally had an inexplicable sense of superiority, even if their tribe's living conditions were worse than that of humans. After all, one was a long-lived race with a lifespan of hundreds of years, while the other was a short-lived race that could only live for a few decades. In terms of the nature of life, there was a huge gap between the two, so it wasn't strange for similar situations to occur. The only fortunate thing was that the elves had a civilization of tens of thousands of years. They were not like the rapidly expanding country bumpkins in the late age of discovery, who preached the idea of white supremacy everywhere and treated other people of color as inferior people or slaves. Most of the elves' sense of superiority was on a spiritual level. Although they were somewhat arrogant, they had never developed to the point of being disgusting. Of course, the dwarves were of course. For some reason, these short, coarse, and stubborn men who were as stubborn as rocks were naturally incompatible with the elves' personalities. Although it wasn't to the point where they would fight to the death, once they met, they were bound to quarrel. In serious cases, it might even lead to a fight. Looking at the powerful magic attached to the gemstone pendant, Andre nodded thoughtfully. Messenger, so you're saying that you're on mission. Can you tell me what this mission is? Although the elves had lost to the ancient magic civilization in the competition for the dominance of the continent, it didn't mean that they weren't powerful. On the contrary, their strength was beyond imagination. Just think about it. Even the members of a race who had just reached adulthood had lived for at least 100 years. How great would their knowledge and skills be? The problem of insufficient time and energy for humans didn't exist for the elves. These pointy-eared fellows could use their long lifespan to slowly learn all kinds of knowledge and skills. No matter how stupid or clumsy they would gradually become wise under the precipitation of time. Their only weakness was that their growth cycle was too long. From birth to adulthood, it would take at least 100 to 150 years. If they lost a large number of people in war, it wouldn't be possible to make up for it in a short period of time. However, it was the opposite for humans. 150 years was enough for several generations to multiply, and it wouldn't be a problem for the population to swell 10 times. It was from a perspective of preserving their strength that the elves finally took the initiative to withdraw from the competition with the ancient magic civilization for the dominance of the continent, choosing to settle down on an island in the depths of the ocean. As a mage who had a deep understanding of the elven civilization, Andre knew that the elves had never given up on infiltrating the continent. They had even attempted to support a puppet regime a long time ago, vainly attempting to become the ruler of the world once again. However, it was a pity that this plan was seen through by the human gods before it could be implemented, and they could only give up in the end. He was very curious as to what kind of unspeakable secret the messenger of the elven court had suddenly appeared in the south this time. Sensing the vigilance and suspicion in the other party's eyes, Rolling stroked her waterfall-like long hair and explained with a smile, "My mission is very simple. It is to select youths from the entire southern region above the age of 12 and below the age of 25, and invite them to participate in the elven coming-of-age ceremony that occurs once every 100 years." Andre glanced at Clive Crom from the corner of his eye, subconsciously frowning. Coming-of-age ceremony? According to your tradition, aren't only elves allowed to participate? Since when can humans participate as well? It seems that you have a very deep understanding of elves. That's right. According to tradition, to participate in this ceremony, one must at least have elven blood. However, I didn't say that the youths who were invited would participate as humans. Rowling pretended to wink playfully as she spoke. That's the theory. Andre's face instantly revealed an expression of realization, and he muttered to himself. Among the various transfiguration spells, there are many that can change a person's gender, bloodline, and even race. Therefore, when these youths arrive at their destination, they will quickly be transformed into elves by the power of magic, and naturally have the qualifications to participate in the coming-of-age ceremony. Absorbing the elites of other races to make up for their lack of numbers, this is truly a genius idea. Your intelligence and wisdom are astonishing. I said before that I would give you an invitation, and now it's time to fulfill this promise. Rowling took the brightest and most dazzling gem from her sapphire pendant and gently placed it on Andre's hand, her eyes revealing a trace of unconcealed expectation. Chapter 9:35. Invitation. Staring at the dazzling sapphire in his palm, an imperceptible sneer appeared on Andre's face. He quickly shook his head firmly and said, "I'm sorry, Miss Rowling. I'm afraid I'll have to reject your kindness. I'm a human. I am, and I will be. I don't intend to abandon my race, nor do I intend to become an elf. As a transmigrator from the era of information explosion, he would not be like the natives of this world, who would be confused by the so-called elegant and noble identity and lifestyle of the elves. He could not tolerate their slow-paced attitude towards life. Of course, the most important thing was that he lived in the electronic era in his previous life where civilization and material were extremely advanced. He did not feel that there was anything in the elven civilization that was worthy of his attention. Perhaps they had top-notch skills in magic, but in terms of material and entertainment, they were not even as good as an ordinary earthling. Rowling's perception was very sharp. She instantly noticed the contempt in Andre's words, and the smile quickly froze on her face. Never in her wildest dreams did she expect that there would be a human on the continent who would disdain the invitation of the elves. She stood there awkwardly, unable to say a word for a long time. Not only her, but even General Zack's mouth was twitching slightly. Envy, jealousy, and hatred were all written in his eyes. It must be known that transforming oneself into an elf meant a lifespan of hundreds of years. Many human nobles dreamed of obtaining this. But now, there was someone who regarded it as dung, as if accepting their invitation was an insult to himself. As for Clive Crom, who had always been prejudiced against Andre, he was so angry that his face was red and his body was trembling. He was on the verge of exploding, because he heard a strong sense of sarcasm in the words "just now," as if whoever accepted the invitation of the elves was a betrayal to the human race. He, who had always valued honor more than his life, could not tolerate such an insult. If he had not been reprimanded not long ago, he would have drawn his sword and rushed up to fight with his life. In just a few seconds, a strange atmosphere enveloped the deck of the Eye of Arcane. Even the sailors could feel that something was wrong, and they cast vigilant glances at the envoy group. Seeing that the situation was developing in a bad direction, General Zack hurriedly coughed and said, "I think this topic should end here. Next, let's talk about the specific terms. You should know that the council has ordered to start counting the population and the amount of wealth in the city. I believe it won't take long to give a satisfactory answer." "Not bad. This is a good start. I will send people to supervise the whole process. I hope you won't do anything behind the scenes. In addition, I want to take over all the ships in the harbor, whether they are merchant ships or warships. As the victor of the war, Andre put forward his request without hesitation. After all, the purpose of this voyage was to plunder wealth and population, so there was no need to hide anything. After all, Bakarov City had lost the ability to build ships, so there was no chance for them to rise again. No matter how angry they were or how unwilling they were, they could only endure. No problem. I can arrange it for you right away. General Zach agreed without hesitation. Seeing that the other party was so cooperative, Andre nodded in satisfaction. Very good. As long as you don't play any tricks, I can guarantee that only half of the city near the harbor will be destroyed. Remember, don't let me find out that you have any contact with Loretta Botons, or else. At this point, he deliberately paused and glanced sharply at Rowling, who was sitting on the chair. Or else, I don't care who you invite to be the envoy. There will only be one result, and that is to disappear from the map forever. Do you understand? Understood. Zach shivered subconsciously. At the same time, he was secretly surprised by the tough attitude of the other party. It was as if he didn't take the envoy of the Elven court seriously at all. Rowling, who had never felt such strong hostility, bit her lower lip. She raised her head and asked softly, Your Excellency, do you have some prejudice against us elves? Why are you so unfriendly? Friendly? Ha! No. I think you might have misunderstood. Andre laughed and waved his hand, a meaningful expression appearing on his face. I don't have any prejudice against the elves themselves, but I am very disgusted by people interfering with my plans. If you're here to talk about an alliance or trade, then I'll welcome you with open arms. But if you want to interfere in the terms, then I'm sorry to say that you're my enemy. As for how I treat my enemies, I believe that Bakarov City is a good example. Isn't it? Can I take that as a threat? Rowling clearly didn't want to lose in terms of momentum, and she forced herself to remain calm. Andre shrugged with a smile. If you think it is, then it is. If you think it isn't, then it isn't. It all depends on you, not me. Rowling immediately let out a sigh of relief when she heard those ambiguous words. A faint smile appeared on her face once more. I'm not your enemy, and I don't want to interfere in the conflict between you and Bakarov City. I'm only here as a witness. The nobles in the city are afraid that you'll destroy the city after gaining benefits, so I'm here. Oh, so that's how it is? It seems that there was a misunderstanding between us, but it's been cleared up now. To friendship, cheers. Andre raised his teacup and took a sip of mint tea. To friendship. Rowling also raised her teacup and took a small sip, her face full of annoyance. She realized that she'd been tricked by the other party's performance and inadvertently revealed her bottom line. Now, let alone negotiate, she'd even lost the initiative in the conversation. Under Andre's orders, Kent the Seawolf began to send people to take over the ships docked at the docks and harbor. At the same time, he ordered a few ships full of pirates to come ashore and head into the city under the guidance of the emissary. Their mission was to escort the people and wealth to the seaside and then ship them away. Seeing that everything was going according to plan, Andre's tense nerves relaxed a little, and he chatted with the half-elves one after another. Just when he was feeling a little tired, Rowling suddenly opened her mouth and suggested, Your Excellency, I sincerely invite you once again to participate in the elf coming-of-age ceremony. Although, according to tradition, only those with elf blood can participate, but as the chosen of the fire elemental prince, you still have this privilege. Chapter 9:36. Why must you invite me? Is it because of the Flaming Duke's identity, or something else? Don't find excuses to fool me. I'm not the idiot behind you who gets hot-blooded just because of a few words. After saying that, Andre put down the cup in his hand and glanced at Clivecrom with a provocative gaze. The latter was like a provoked bull, and even his breathing became hurried. As a complete conspiracy theorist, he had always been suspicious, especially when someone mentioned a certain matter to him again and again. The alarm in his heart would instantly go off. Must we get to the bottom of this? Isn't it good to maintain a little mystery? Rowling obviously didn't want to answer this question and began to change the topic in an attempt to divert the attention away from this aspect. However, for someone like Andre, who is used to living in mutual deception, this little trick wasn't worth mentioning at all. Not to mention acting dumb. Even if this half-elf woman stripped naked, it wouldn't make him lower his guard at all. Just like this, one wanted to get to the bottom of the matter while the other avoided answering. The conversation immediately fell into a stalemate. Then, they looked at each other in silence. No one was willing to speak first. After a full 10 minutes, Rowling finally lost this psychological battle and complained with a bitter smile. "Oh my, you're not a gentleman at all. You actually use such a method to force a lady. All right, actually, I've taken a fancy to your talents in shipbuilding and alchemy. I intend to invite you to the Elven Court to discuss the issue of cooperation. What do you think?" Cooperation? Andre didn't expect that after tormenting for so long, she would come up with such a ridiculous reason. However, Rowling didn't think so. She nodded seriously and said solemnly, "That's right. Cooperation. I believe you should be clear that we elves no longer have the ambition to touch the continent. We only want to live peacefully on the islands in the depths of the ocean and maintain good relations with some coastal forces. We also want to strike down the audacious pirates and slave hunters who intend to rob the elven villages. As for the specific conditions, I don't have the authority to discuss with you, so I can only invite you to the Elven Court. There are still pirates and slave hunters who dare to attack you. Are they tired of living?" Andre frowned and asked. He obviously did not believe the other party's explanation. After all, the elves were not honest human farmers. Every adult had a profession level, especially in the areas of archery, swordsmanship, and magic. They were born with an incomparable racial advantage. If dozens of pirates accidentally barged into the elven village, the unlucky ones would definitely not be the elves, but the pitiful pirates. If they were unlucky, more than half of them would die. Apart from that, ever since the ancient human magic civilization's floating cities and platforms disappeared, the elves' magic battleships have become the fastest and most powerful combat platforms in the world. Even the arcane eye under their feet would have no chance of surviving once it encountered the elves' magical battleships. How could such a race that was armed to the teeth have a headache over mere pirates and slave catchers? Without any concealment, Rowling immediately saw through Andre's thoughts. She sighed helplessly and explained, "You must think that with the power of the Elven Court, you can easily crush those annoying flies, right? Isn't that the case?" Andre asked expressionlessly. "All right, it seems like you don't understand our troubles. In fact, the pirates and slave catchers who are harassing us are not ordinary people, but mercenaries who are semi-officially supported by the Kingdom of Deland. They are well-equipped and use illusions to disguise themselves as ships, sneaking into the island silently and attacking a certain village. They will retreat immediately regardless of whether they succeed or not. Our flying troops and magic battleships can't do anything about it." Rowling's expression turned ugly at the mention of the Elven Court's predicament. She clenched her fists in anger, especially at the mention of pirates and slave catchers. "The Kingdom of Deland? I see." Andre nodded in realization. As far as he knew, the upper echelons of the Kingdom of Deland were once enslaved by more than 20 crazy elven mages more than 1,500 years ago. They were forced to offer large amounts of money and scarce resources so that they could conduct all sorts of magic research. Even though they managed to break free from their control and killed all the elven mages who were controlling them, they were very hostile towards the elves from then on. They even captured all the elven tribes living in the forest and reduced them to slaves. The males were sent to the Colosseum, while the females became the playthings of the nobles and rich merchants. Over time, they even formed a unique consumer group. Moreover, after killing the elven mages, the kingdom received a large amount of magic technology from the elves. Therefore, it wasn't strange that they could evade all sorts of magic detection and successfully attack the elven village. However, what Andre didn't understand was why the elves didn't retaliate and allowed the enemy to wreak havoc in their territory. This didn't fit their vengeful nature. After thinking for a few seconds, he tapped the table lightly and said, "I can accept your invitation, but I can't guarantee that I'll be there. After all, I'll be very busy in the next few months, so it'll be difficult for me to spare too much time. It's all right as long as you agree." We'll send mages to welcome you when the time comes. We definitely won't waste too much of your time." Seeing that this matter was finally settled, Rowling immediately let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly gave a guarantee. She knew the power of the gunships better than most people. She also knew that if this technology fell into the hands of those who were hostile towards the elves, the consequences would be severe. Therefore, no matter what, she wanted Andre to personally make a trip and try to sign an agreement that satisfied both sides. After all, the elves were able to live alone in the sea because of the protection of the sea and the magic fleet. Once this advantage no longer existed, with their wealth and the greed of the humans, they wouldn't be able to live a single day of peace. Hearing that there would be mages in charge of the teleportation, Andre didn't decline and officially agreed. After asking for the specific date of the ceremony, he sat back on the chair and closed his eyes to rest. He silently felt the boiling power in his body. Without a doubt, this power came from the Prince of Fire Elements, Aesop Desir. He was urging him to quickly destroy the city in front of him and use destruction and fear to announce the return of the Flaming Duke to the world. However, Andre didn't want to kill too many innocent people, so he was still waiting. He was waiting for half of the city's wealth and population to be completely wiped out. Only then would he personally send down the scorching flames to let everyone know the consequences of offending him. Chapter 9:37. Counting the population and wealth was never an easy task, especially when the city was plunged into unprecedented chaos and panic. The ruling class, led by Commander Niamyadina, had resorted to coercive measures, using large numbers of troops and knights to drive the commoners out of their homes and confiscate their belongings. They were then handed over to the pirates on shore and escorted to the docks to be loaded onto the ships. Even so, they still met with considerable resistance, especially the mercenaries and adventurers who were used to freedom. How could they allow themselves to be controlled by others? Without a word, a chaotic battle broke out. In the end, due to the absolute difference in quantity and quality, they were either executed on the spot or shackled to become glorious slaves. In just a few hours, tens of thousands of helpless civilians were violently stuffed into the cabin. Among them were men, women, the elderly, and children. At a glance, it was densely packed. It was completely crowded. It was comparable to the slave ships that transported black people on Earth. But it was no wonder. After all, the number of ships was limited. In order to take so many people away, Sea Wave can't even threw away the ballast at the bottom of the ship. Apart from that, plundering wealth was also a time-consuming and laborious task. Tons of gold, silver, and copper coins were mixed together into wooden barrels and carried onto the ship. There were other things of value, such as gold, silver, jewels, utensils, textiles, handicrafts, works of art, wine, armor, weapons, grain, spices, seasonings, leather, grease, and so on. They were all taken aboard as spoils of war. By the time it was all over, the entire fleet, including the ships that had been taken over from the harbor, were all deep in the water. There was no need to ask to know that they were filled with wealth and people. The pockets of the sailors and pirates who participated in the operation were bulging, filled with all sorts of gold, silver, and trinkets that they had stolen along the way. Under normal circumstances, this kind of theft would have been at least a dozen lashes. But now, whether it was Sea Wolf Kent or the captain, first mate, and bosun who were in charge of restraining the sailors, none of them uttered a word. The reason was simple. The amount of wealth they had plundered this time was simply too much, so much that they had to selectively give up a portion of it. Thus, they turned a blind eye to the actions of their subordinates. The cries of the commoners, the laughter of the pirates, and the groveling of the rulers of Bacaro City. When all of this was mixed together, it formed a black and white picture. It was so full of sarcasm, as if it was mocking the greed and stupidity of mortals. Until dawn, all the noise and chaos returned to peace. Half of the city near the port was completely cleared, leaving only empty streets and uninhabited houses. As the last ship left the dock, The unprecedented looting finally came to an end. Kent the Seawolf boarded the Eye of Arcane in a small boat with a flushed face. He reported in an excited tone, "Master, we are fully loaded and can return at any time." "Very good. Have the fleet raise the anchor and prepare to raise the sails. We will set sail in a quarter of an hour." After saying that, Andre slowly stood up from the chair, and golden sparks began to flicker around his body. When General Zack saw him like this, he was instantly shocked and hurriedly asked, What are you doing?" The corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly as he replied meaningfully, "Of course I'm doing what I should do. Don't worry, I'll keep my promise and only destroy half of Bacaro City." After saying this, he ignored the stunned expression of the other party and activated his flame flight ability. His entire body shot up into the air like a cannonball. In the process of flight, he quickly transformed his body into a fire elemental form. Like a meteor, he used the bright flames to dispel the darkness of dawn, emitting intense light and heat like the sun. The only difference was that this light and heat did not bring life, but destruction and death. The rulers and citizens of Bacaro City, who were destined to have a sleepless night, nervously watched the empty flames in the sky. Even the priests, knights, and paladins of the church walked out of the church, intending to use their eyes to record everything that was about to happen. The Flaming Duke, a name that had once caused the entire southern region to tremble, a name that would bring destruction and slaughter wherever it went. Now that the emissary with this terrifying title had appeared in the sky above the city, everyone was waiting for his judgment to descend. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, Andre took a deep breath and quickly unleashed the power of the fire elemental within his body. In just a few seconds, a giant fireball more than 100 meters in diameter had gathered around him. The scorching heat of the fireball could be felt even from hundreds of meters away. Seeing this, General Nehemiah gulped and asked the mage beside him, "Ivan, tell me, if you use all your strength, can you block this spell?" "I'm very sorry, General, but I'm afraid there's nothing we can do." The middle-aged mage smiled bitterly and shook his head. He quickly explained, "Even though this Flaming Duke is only using the most primitive method of extracting fire elemental energy from the air, the amount is simply too great. Unless we can cover the entire city with fire elemental protection spells, running away would be the wisest choice." "Then what about its power? Will it affect us as well?" Nehemiah asked anxiously. "Based on the amount of energy it has gathered, the most it can do is turn half the city into hell. As for whether it will affect us or not, that depends on where it lands." Before the mage could finish his sentence, Andre, who was floating in the air, suddenly began to descend. His body crashed into the ground at an incredible speed. In the next second, boom, a deafening explosion rang out. The terrifying fireball burned everything within 2 kilometers of the building to ashes. Even the rocks were turned into lava. The area affected by the explosion was more than a few kilometers wide. It looked like hell itself. The sea and the sky were dyed red by the flames. Under Andre's careful control, the flames only burned half of the city near the docks. The other half was not affected at all. With his new ability, Flame Shaping, he could easily control fire elemental energy, which was the most violent and difficult to control. He guided it to spread to the surroundings and incinerated everything that could be burned. Orire had a tradition of worshipping the strong. After the flames engulfed half of the city, not only did the people of Bacaro City not feel resentment, many of them even knelt down and prayed loudly to the Lord of the Raging Flame, hoping that this power would never appear before them again. Chapter 938. According to the definition of physics and chemistry, fire was one of the manifestations of combustion. It was a process where fuel and air were mixed and quickly turned into light and heat. It was both a physical phenomenon and a chemical reaction. Of course, these were the explanations in textbooks back on Earth. However, in this world full of magic, fire was one of the primary forces that supported the universe. Not only could it bring light, warmth, and life, but it could also bring death, fear, and destruction. Andre was now controlling a sea of fire that stretched as far as the eye could see, completely enveloping half of Bakarov City. The soaring flames could be seen clearly even from tens of kilometers away. Countless buildings and houses were burned down, and large amounts of stones and bricks melted into magma. He could feel the surging power in his body erupting like a tide. The fire elemental prince, Asir Desir, used his actions to express his appreciation and support for his actions today. With half of the city turned into a purgatory, everyone alive felt fear and reverence from the bottom of their hearts. This fear and reverence was the only thing Asir Desir desired in the material world. Bartholomew stood on the deck, dumbfounded as he looked at the scene in the distance. He couldn't believe that it was real. After who knew how long, he finally took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "Gods above, this is too terrifying." He actually destroyed half of the city by himself. Is there a second person on this continent who can do this? Because he is the Flaming Duke, the messenger of destruction and destruction. Anyone who angers him will have to pay a heavy price. Everyone should remember this. I don't want these terrible flames to fall on our heads one day, Kent said meaningfully as he glanced at the old captain beside him. Eunice had never had a good impression of pirates. She sneered and mocked, "Humph. Only people with bad intentions like you would fear Master's power. I'm not worried at all." Kent ignored the half-demon's provocation and continued to observe the raging fire around the docks. It had been a full 5 minutes since Andre had started the fire, but it showed no signs of extinguishing. Instead, it was growing fiercer. Ordinary people would find it hard to believe that such an intense burning was actually locked down by an invisible force, preventing it from spreading to the other half of the city. For those who knew the ropes, this precise control was far more terrifying than the scorching flames. It was even more chilling. Strolling along the streets filled with lava and fire, Andre soon arrived at the city hall located at the back half of the city. At this moment, his body was surrounded by a whirlpool-like raging flame storm. His entire person was like a demon god, emitting an awe-inspiring and inviolable aura. Just like what was described in the book Gods and Chosen Ones, no matter who became the chosen one of a god or a powerful creature from another world, they would inevitably carry the other party's attributes, the most direct of which was the form of energy. Nehemiah noticed Andre's arrival. He hurried out of the hall and bowed respectfully. "Welcome, esteemed Flaming Duke. You are an honest and trustworthy person. You have kept your promise and did not completely destroy our city. Please allow me to express our gratitude to you on behalf of all the citizens of Bokaro City." "Representative? I don't think you can represent the citizens of this city. I'm afraid they hate you to the core right now, don't they?" Andre stood in the flames and teased with a teasing tone. Nehemiah smiled bitterly and nodded. "Yes, thanks to you, they can't wait to skin me alive, eat my flesh, drink my blood, and crush every bone in my body. But what can they do? They still have to submit to the nobles. Without the nobles, they can't even guarantee their basic livelihood." Andre smiled noncommittally. "Perhaps, but you'd better not underestimate them. You should know that the power of the people can be very frightening at times, especially when they have nowhere else to go. They can erupt with unimaginable power. But you won't let us go, will you? If I'm not mistaken, you've already killed Francis and become the ruler of the Sardinia Islands. You've also started planning to take over the southern seas. That's why you urgently need some obedient vassals. That's why we're still alive." Nehemiah's political acumen was truly worthy of his reputation as the man who had fought against Lincoln City for decades. He was able to see through Andre's plans with just a few words. He even wanted to take this opportunity to inject vitality into the city that had just gone through a tribulation and get rid of the current crisis as soon as possible. "That's right. I need some vassals to expand my influence, but whether or not Bokaro City will have the opportunity to do so will depend on your performance. I'm sure you know what I mean." Andre's eyes flashed with a sharp light as he silently waited for Nehemiah's reply. Nehemiah hesitated for a long while before sighing helplessly. Fine. You win. I swear on my family's name that I will never work with Loretta Botons, nor will I exchange any information with him. Are you satisfied? Satisfied? No, no, no. That's not enough. Andre wagged a finger in front of Nehemiah's eyes. You still have to tell me what kind of men he has and what kind of secret plans he has. I'm very sorry, Your Excellency. I'm afraid I can't help you with that. First of all, my cooperation with him is limited to the destruction of Lincoln City's navy. I don't know anything about his secret plans. Secondly, I'm a man of principle. I won't betray my former allies. If I betray Loretta Botons today, will you still trust me in the future? Finally, and most importantly, I don't dare to offend Loretta Botons. Sometimes, he's a madman who doesn't care about anything. Once he's angered, he's simply more terrible than any kind of natural disaster. When I stand in front of him, I even find it difficult to breathe. Nehemiah shuddered involuntarily as he uttered those words. His eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. As someone who had been in contact with Loretta Botons for a long time, Nehemiah knew all too well what kind of person he was. For the sake of his family and his own life, it was wiser to remain silent. Chapter 9:39. Andre did not expect Nehemiah to be so fearful of Loretta Botons. Even now, Nehemiah did not dare to betray him. What puzzled him even more was that Nehemiah had no intention of relenting even after he had revealed his identity as the Flaming Duke. Of course, from a certain point of view, the Duke hidden in the noble system of Lincoln City was indeed not an easy character to deal with, especially his sometimes crazy and sometimes rational way of doing things. It was completely confusing because one would never know what his next move would be. Nehemiah noticed Andre's confusion and sighed. You must be wondering why I didn't go all out when I had already chosen to betray the Empire. Am I right? He explained. You must be wondering why I didn't go all out when I had already chosen to betray the Empire. Andre nodded. Yes. Normally, when a person chooses to betray someone, they want to see their predecessor die a horrible death. That's the only way they can enjoy the benefits of betrayal and prove that they are right. It may sound harsh, but I think that's how a normal person would react. You're right. A complete betrayal can bring a lot of benefits, but the problem is that I can't, and I don't dare to. Perhaps you still don't know, but Loretta Botons is actually a two-faced person. The two-faced here doesn't mean that she has two completely different identities, but her personality. I'm sorry, but I can't provide you with too much information in this regard because if I say too much, it's hard to guarantee that he won't fly into a rage out of humiliation and personally uproot me and my family. Don't doubt that he's as powerful as you. In fact, he's even more powerful than you. So, I can only promise you that I'll do my best as a vassal until the battle between you and him is over. But if you lose, then I'll have to choose a new side for the sake of survival. As expected of a mature politician, Nehemiah was able to openly express his position and that of the ruling class behind him. He knew that after this calamity, Bakharov would be at the mercy of others for a long time. The only thing they could do was to submit to the strong. Anyone who could threaten their safety would gain their loyalty. That was all. Even though this result was slightly different from Andre's expectations, it was still within the acceptable range. Hence, he replied, Sure, I'm not a heartless person, and I can understand your difficulties. As long as you do your part well, I guarantee that anyone who intends to attack this city in the future will be my enemy. Politics was about uniting all the forces that could be united. It was different from war, where there was a clear distinction between friend and foe. It was not a world of black and white, but a world of gray, where it was impossible to distinguish between friend and foe. In this world, today's enemies could become allies tomorrow, and today's allies could become enemies tomorrow. As a cool-headed leader, Andre knew very well that most people were selfish and would only consider things from their own perspective. If he wanted to expand his influence to the whole South, he had to learn to tolerate the wavering and betrayal of his allies. This was the magnanimity and tolerance that a qualified politician should have. Thank you very much. I'm relieved to see that you're such a reasonable person. Nehemiah bowed again. His heart that had been hanging in the air finally relaxed, and the frown on his face relaxed a little. Don't be too nervous. You'll find that I'm actually a very generous person after working with me for a long time. I'm sure we'll have a pleasant cooperation in the future, but you have to prove your worth first. Well, that's all for today. I'll send someone to negotiate the specific terms with you in a few days. See you later. With that, Andre's body suddenly emitted a gust of air, and he shot up into the air like a cannonball. Under the illumination of the rising sun, he quickly flew towards the arcane eye. Nehemiah rubbed his swollen forehead and whispered to his trembling attendant, "Tell me, what's the situation in the city right now? Are the citizens rebelling? Is there any sign of instability in our army?" "Sir, the unrest in the city has mostly subsided. After witnessing the power of the Flaming Duke, the citizens are in a state of deep fear. They're no longer in the mood to organize a rebellion. As for the army, apart from the Griffin Knights, the rest have already accepted the fact that we've become their vassals," the young attendant replied cautiously. "Very good. It seems the situation is in our favor. Summon everyone to a meeting and disband the Griffin Knights. Collect all the hatching Griffin eggs and give them to the Flaming Duke as a gift when he arrives. We no longer need the Griffin Knights, nor do we need their arrogance and stubbornness." Nehemiah's eyes flashed with a sharp glint, and he directly sentenced the Griffin Knights to death. In his eyes, both the Griffin Knights and the army were tools to consolidate his rule. Since these tools had lost their value, there was naturally no need for them to exist. No matter how valuable or precious these tools were, he would not allow them to rebel against him. There was no exception. The young attendant was so scared that he shivered. He hurriedly lowered his head and replied, "Understood. I'll convey your will." After Andre landed safely on the deck of the Arcane Eye, the huge fleet slowly set sail towards the Sardinia Islands. Rolling, who was sitting on a small boat, looked at the cheering pirates and sighed softly. She muttered to herself, "We are witnessing the birth of a legend. I really hope he won't be our enemy in the future." Enemy? I swear that I will never make an enemy out of him again. I'm sure all the nobles in Bakarov City feel the same way. General Zack shook his head bitterly. Perhaps. Who knows what will happen in the future? Sir General, I think I must return to the court immediately to report what happened today. Please convey my apologies to Commander Nehemiah. After saying that, Rolling waved at Clive Crom and activated a magic item. The two of them were quickly wrapped in a strong white light and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 940. The fleet full of treasures, resources, and people traveled slowly on the sea for 8 full days, taking twice as long as when they were empty, before finally arriving at the Sardinia Islands. Some large ships with especially deep drafts, such as the Eye of Arcane, couldn't even enter the reef-filled waterway between the islands. They could only stop at the outskirts and rely on small boats to transport the goods away. Such enormous wealth and population, numbering in the tens of thousands, instantly ignited all of the nobles and smugglers in Valen City. They stared with bloodshot eyes as the stevedores worked from morning to night, and then again from night to morning. After 48 hours, the exhausted stevedores finally delivered the last batch of goods to the warehouse and went home to rest with their generous salaries in hand. As for the people plundered from Bakarov City, they were sent to the other islands in batches. Only those with knowledge and skills were left in the city. Of course, such a large number of refugees wasn't something that could be done with just a few words. Fortunately, Andre didn't lack money or food, so he left it all to Mayor Maris and didn't ask about it himself. Mountains of gold and silver coins that needed to be shoveled away, chests of all kinds of gems and accessories, priceless works of art, paintings and sculptures, exquisite handmade carpets, bundles of wool, cloth, and leather, thousands of tons of flour, bacon, oats, cheese, butter, smoked fish, ham, and even expensive condiments like spices and caviar. The large influx of people had led to an increase in consumption and taxes. From this moment onwards, the Sardinia Islands had truly broken away from their awkward situation of being neither up nor down, and were truly charging towards the most powerful city in the south. André used his actions to show everyone what the art of robbery was. Thus, the moment he came ashore, he immediately attracted deafening cheers. The pirates in particular worshipped him like a god. After a short but enthusiastic welcoming ceremony, the new rulers of the islands entered the castle one after another and began to secretly discuss the direction of the alliance's future development. Everyone, I don't want to waste any more words. I only want to tell you that Bakarov City has now lost all of their ships, shipyards, and shipbuilders. They will lose the sea from now on and become our vassals. This also means that there is no city in the entire southern sea that is stronger than us at sea, and no one can threaten the safety of the Sardinia Islands. From today onwards, we will fully activate the 1,000 Sails project. In 10 years, we will build a truly invincible fleet and completely monopolize more than 80% of the maritime trade. Please tell me, are you willing to support me? Riding on the momentum of his triumphant return, André went straight to the point and proposed the direction of development for the next 10 years. As a transmigrator who had a deep understanding of the rise and fall of the European countries during the Age of Discovery, he knew better than anyone else what was needed to obtain hegemony at sea, and that was more, bigger, and faster-sailing ships. In the 17th century, both England and France had thousands of ships, and the powerful Netherlands had more than 10,000 sailing ships. Even Portugal, at its peak, had more than 2,000 sailing ships. Compared to them, the city-states of the Southern Sea region could only be considered as babies that were staggering forward. Regardless of quantity or quality, they were still far inferior. Therefore, whoever could first realize the importance of expanding the scale of the shipbuilding industry will be able to seize the initiative in this fierce competition that had yet to begin and leave the other opponents far behind. It was obvious that André was cheating, using his knowledge and experience that far exceeded this world to guide his allies on the right path. Old George, who had always been known for his conservatism, frowned and asked, "The 1,000 Sails project requires too much investment. Are you sure we can afford it now?" "That's right. We've already invested a lot of money in the city's infrastructure. I'm afraid we don't have the energy to support the shipbuilding industry now. Why don't we wait 2 years?" Another noble quickly stood up and echoed. In order to obtain more shares, many members had invested almost half of their cash, so it was impossible to raise more funds in a short period of time. In addition, they did not want to take the risk of borrowing, so they did not seem to support this radical development model. André glanced at the expressions on everyone's faces, and the corner of his mouth curled up slightly. He turned around and asked Countess Anasta, who was sitting on his right, "Madam, can you tell me if the salt production on your side can still be increased?" "Of course. As long as there are enough people, I can increase the production of coarse salt by more than 5 times. The process of refining salt is a bit more complicated, but it can still be increased by 3 times. Why did you suddenly ask this?" Countess Anasta answered without thinking. Ever since she took over the process of drying salt, she treated it as a core secret of the family. Other than the few people she trusted the most, she did not even tell Chloe. She was afraid that if outsiders found out, they would not be able to earn as much profit as they did now. "It's nothing. Since everyone here lacks funds, why don't we let them join the salt business? Since all the city-states in the Southern Sea region are our market, why not make full use of it? After all, salt is a necessity that everyone needs. You can transport it to any place and exchange it for local specialties. I can give you a very low price. As the saying goes, it's better to drive people with benefits than with righteousness." André never liked to use forceful means to promote his ideas. He felt that doing so was like robbery. There was no technical content, and it was easy to cause a backlash. But using benefits to guide people was different. As long as there was profit to be made, there would naturally be countless people flocking to it. "Really? You plan to increase the production of salt?" Old George asked with his eyes shining. It was obvious that he was moved. Not only him, but even the eyes of the smugglers who rarely spoke began to emit green light. Looking at the pairs of wolf-like allies around him, André laughed and replied, "Of course. Of course, my dear friends, in the next 6 months, I will provide you with an unlimited amount of salt. I can even let you pick up the goods first and pay later. The profits from the sales will be split in half. I don't know if you are satisfied with that. Now, who is against the 1,000 sales plan? No one. I swear to support your decision 100%. That's right. Start the 1,000 sales plan. Let everyone tremble in front of our huge fleet. As the saying goes, huge benefits can make people crazy and make people lose their rationality and ability to think. Chapter 941. Project 1,000 Sails, as the name suggested, was a plan to build 1,000 new Galen sailboats. The smallest of them would be 350 tons, while the largest would be 1,200 tons. For the Orier, which was extremely backward in terms of production, this was simply an impossible task. One had to know that the shipbuilding industry wasn't just about putting together random pieces of wood. Just the selection of wood was very strict. The best wood was undoubtedly ironwood. Other woods like oak, fir, teak, and phoebe were also barely passable. After the wood was cut down, it first had to be precisely cut. If there were no problems with the cutting, then the entire wood would be considered scrapped. In addition, all the wood had to be dried. Not only did the water in the wood have to be removed, but more importantly, the plant cells had to be completely dead. This was because it was very difficult for water to seep into dead cells, and they would not deform again. Finally, a layer of paint had to be brushed on, waterproof and anti-corrosion. Only then would it be qualified as a ship material. Generally speaking, it would take at least half a year or even 2 to 3 years to obtain a ship material like this. Even if Andre took out his killer charcoal to dry it, it would still take a week to half a month. Just the materials alone were so difficult to obtain, not to mention the shipbuilding itself. At the very least, with the current ability of the Sardinia Islands, they could at most build 4 ships at the same time. Without the help of magic, they could probably build a 400 to 500-ton merchant ship in 3 months. As for the sail gun ships, it would take 1 to 2 years. This was also why Pirate King Francis dared to boast about dominating the seas after the destruction of Lincoln City's navy. No city in the southern seas could rebuild a large navy in a short period of time. Of course, the training of captains and sailors was also very important. Otherwise, it would be useless to have empty ships without enough manpower to operate them. In short, this project, 1,000 Sails, had only taken the first difficult step. As for how far it could develop in the future, that would have to wait for the test of time. In order to better manage, Old George proposed that more than 90% of the members of the Alliance vote to form a 6-man council responsible for handling daily affairs. The 6 of them were Kate the Lustful Demon, who represented Andre, Baron Melson, who represented the conservative nobles, Willie Galt, who represented the smugglers, Kent, who represented the pirates, Nick, who represented the commoners and peddlers, and Maris, the mayor of Wayland City. Each of them had an interest group behind them, taking care of almost all aspects. It was enough to make the Sardinia develop in a healthy direction. If nothing unexpected happened, they would be the nominal supreme rulers of this land in the future, and the Alliance would become the dark hand behind the scenes, controlling everything. As the last day of August passed, September finally arrived. Although the temperature did not change much, Andre knew that autumn had arrived. It was time to return to Linton City to settle his personal grudges and establish his position. After months of planning, it was finally time to reel in the net. He couldn't wait to stand in front of Loretta Botons and loudly announce the official start of the game. In fact, Andre should have left a few days ago, but he had been waiting for Orlando to appear. But that half-elf great mage seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. No matter how many methods he tried, he couldn't contact him. Thus, he could only choose to focus on proper business. On the morning of the 5th of September, it was a sunny day. Most of the nobles, including Old George and Countess Anastasia, boarded the Eye of Arcane and embarked on the journey back to Linton City. Accompanying them was General Zack from Bacaro City. His mission was to submit a letter of surrender to the Linton City Council in front of everyone, officially announcing the end of the trade war due to the intervention of the Flaming Duke. As the defeated party, Bacaro City would completely abandon the sea and become a vassal of the Flaming Duke. With this trump card, Andre could rely on his indisputable achievements to become a powerful force on par with the four dukes. He might even be able to use this opportunity to push Countess Anastasia to the front and make her the spokesperson of his interests. But before that, he still had a big show to put on. "Grace, are you ready?" Through the power of the magic coin, Andre looked at the pirate queen kneeling on one knee and asked, "Yes, master. I've already secretly informed all the captains who have pledged their allegiance to us to fly the white flag tomorrow. Those who are stubborn will still fly the black flag." Grace lowered her head and replied respectfully. Andre nodded in satisfaction. "Very good. You've completed your mission with flying colors. As a reward, I'll now officially appoint you as the commander of the Second Fleet of the Sardinia Islands. You'll be reorganized and transformed immediately after returning to Valen City. Remember, I want a disciplined navy, not a group of free and undisciplined people. Do you understand?" "Understood. Please rest assured, I won't let you down." Grace clenched her fists and replied in a very calm tone. Even though she looked no different than usual, one could still see the excitement and ecstasy in her eyes. Because of this title, she had the capital to continue competing with Kent. As long as she didn't make any big mistakes in the future, she was bound to become an important person. "All right, let's end our conversation here. You must cooperate with me tomorrow and put on a good show. You must let everyone in Lincoln City know who saved them." After saying that, a sinister smile appeared on Andre's face. Grace licked his thick lips and replied in the same sinister tone, "My dear master, I promise that there will be a wonderful naval battle tomorrow. The whole city will witness it with their own eyes. You rushed into the middle of the pirates' fleet with a single ship and killed them until they couldn't fight back at all. It was exactly as described in the Bard stories. Countless civilians will cheer for you. Young girls and noble women will scream for you. The nobles, led by the four dukes, will personally come to the docks to express their gratitude to you. Tomorrow's naval battle is destined to become a legend in this city, and no one will ever surpass it. You will become a true hero." As the last word left her mouth, the magic coin that maintained the communication between the two suddenly shrunk and was quickly cut off. Looking at the spider coin that automatically flew back into his palm, Andre sneered and muttered to himself, "How ironic. I didn't think that someone as unscrupulous as me would become a hero one day. It looks like many of those heroes in history were similar to me, relying on disguises and deceiving ignorant people to get to their positions." Chapter 942. As a typical conspiracy theorist, Andre had never been stingy in considering problems from the darkest point of view of human nature. In his opinion, those famous heroes on Orire might really be good people who step forward in times of danger, but most of them should be the result of deliberate propaganda. After all, this was a world where communication was extremely underdeveloped. Information was basically transmitted by wandering bards, merchants, and adventurers. The former, in particular, controlled almost 70% of the public opinion of the entire continent. This also meant that once they began to flatter someone, even if that person was an evil bastard, he or she would be forcefully promoted as a hero. The most obvious example was the famous Munster family from 700 years ago. It was said that this family, born of slaves, quickly rose to power by selling their children, stealing, raping, accepting bribes, incest, assassination, poisoning, and other despicable means. In just 150 years, they successfully mixed into the upper class. In order to erase their dark past, they hired bards on a large scale to whitewash their unscrupulous past and disguise themselves as messengers of justice who fought against decadent rule and evil forces. After a full 60 years, that was 3 generations of continuous propaganda. They had now become a prominent upper-class noble in the southern region. Apart from a few preserved ancient books, almost no one remembered the history of the Munster family's rise to power. One must know that bards were not sacred warriors who adhered to their principles. These guys' moral integrity was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. Most of the time, a charming lady only needed to hook her finger, and they would climb in her bed like dogs who had smelled feces. After a round of passion, they would secretly give a promise that no one knew. The night passed quickly. As soon as the sun rose the next day, the Eye of Arcane lifted its anchor and sailed straight towards Lincoln City. As early as last night, Andre had already informed Bartholomew to prepare for battle. So all the sailors on the ship were on standby, ready to deal with any unexpected situation that might arise at any time. After all, in order for the show to be realistic, one must first not let the people below know too much. Therefore, most of the crew only knew that they were about to face the remnants of a group of pirates. They did not know that these pirates were actually deliberately thrown out as sacrificial lambs for them to make a name for themselves. Similarly, Grace did not tell the captains who refused to join her about the show. She even deliberately sent them to the harbor of Lincoln City to wait for an opportunity to attack the small fishing boats, so that the residents of the city could clearly see the upcoming naval battle. Under the control of the mastermind behind the scenes, the ignorant two sides met at noon, less than 5 nautical miles away from Lincoln City's harbor. Warning! Warning! 10 pirate ships ahead. Eyes Lookout was the first to discover the other party, perhaps because the mast was higher than the others, and began to ring the alarm while desperately shouting, "Of the ship's ship, of the ships of the sail. Everyone, prepare for battle. Gunners in place. Start reloading. Today, let's teach these reckless bastards a lesson. Gunners in place. Start reloading. Of the ship. Everyone began to get busy. The crew carried out their duties, lowering the sails and reloading ammunition. In just a few minutes, the cannons on both sides of the ship were all opened. Hundreds of musketeers gathered on the deck, waiting for the enemy's ship to enter their range. Such a big movement, naturally, could not be hidden from the other passengers on the ship. When old George noticed that something was wrong, he rushed into the captain's cabin immediately and asked nervously, "What's going on? Why are the crew preparing for battle? Who are the enemies?" Lady Anasta of Wesya followed closely behind, and hurriedly came over to echo, "Andre, I think you'd better explain. Many nobles are nervous now." "Don't worry, you two. Just treat what's happening as a stage play. I'm the main character, and those enemies are the villains." According to the script, the main character will eventually defeat the villains and become a hero revered by tens of thousands of people, just like how the bards described it. I wonder if you're satisfied with this explanation? After saying that, the corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly, and an unfathomable smile appeared on his face. "You mean, those pirates are your men?" Old George was not a fool. He immediately understood the subtext in his words. I didn't say that they are my men. I only said that everything is going according to the script," Andre said with a faint smile. He neither admitted nor denied it, and gave an ambiguous answer. Lady Anasta of Wesya was not an idiot. She immediately realized that this was equivalent to admitting it in a disguised way. But she was a smart woman. She did not directly point it out. Instead, she smiled and asked, "In your script, there shouldn't be any danger, right?" "Of course not. Please rest assured that this ship is very safe. No matter how powerful or evil the pirates are, they will not be able to pose any threat to it." Andre was well aware of what the other party was worried about. He gave a straightforward guarantee. He did not think that the pirates' small ship, which was about 250 to 400 tons, could cause any trouble to him. At the same time, the pirates in the bay also discovered the huge Eye of Arcane. They hurriedly turned their ship around and prepared to attack. As the commander, Grace did not even think about it. She immediately raised the battle flag and signaled all the ships to launch a siege. Under her deliberate guidance, the captains who were still loyal to the pirate King Francis raised their black flags and bravely rushed to the front. They did not notice that the other ships behind them had already raised their white flags. They circled around the ship, showing no intention of launching an attack. Just like that, a naval battle that was destined to end from the beginning began. Accompanied by the deafening roar of the Eye of Arcane's cannons, the ship that rushed to the front was instantly shot into a sieve and slowly sank to the bottom of the sea. In the face of absolute firepower, the traditional boarding battle was like a woman's heart. It was as fragile as glass and would shatter at the slightest touch. In just 2 rounds of salvo, at least 3 ships were severely damaged one after another. Either the masts were broken by chain bullets, or there was a huge hole under the hull. They had completely lost their combat ability. After all, the crew of the Eye of Arcane were no longer rookies who had just debuted a few months ago. They were elites who had experienced countless naval battles. In particular, they had just defeated the insufferably arrogant Griffin Knights not long ago. Every one of them was full of confidence. They skillfully operated the cannons, muskets, and sails, moving between the enemy ships with ease. They either knocked them over, sank them, or fired their muskets from above. They fully demonstrated the art of naval warfare. In just half an hour or so, the show came to an end. Chapter 943. I can't believe it. This is simply a massacre. Duke Georgie Bridle put down his binoculars and gasped in astonishment as he muttered to himself. As one of the highest rulers of the city, he immediately came to the lighthouse to observe the situation on the sea when he heard that the pirates had reappeared in the harbor. It could be said that he had witnessed this sea battle from beginning to end. His heart was filled with shock, especially the spectacular scene of the cannons firing. It was enough to make anyone who had some understanding of sea battles feel their blood boil. They wished that they could become the captain of this giant ship and command it to sweep away all the enemies. Duke Alvin, who was standing next to Georgie, also put down his binoculars and said with a serious expression, "Old friend, now is not the time to be amazed, especially before we can confirm whether that ship is an enemy or an ally. You must know that it is much more dangerous than the pirates, especially the mysterious weapon that makes a huge roar. Once it attacks the harbor, 1/5 of the city will be destroyed." Georgie shook his head indifferently. "Don't worry. There's a saying that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Besides, have you forgotten the news brought back by the merchants a few months ago?" "A few months ago? You mean—" Alexander seemed to have thought of something and immediately revealed a look of disbelief. "That's right, my friend. If I'm not wrong, it should be that young genius who has returned. What we need to consider now is not the issue of safety, but how to fulfill the secret treaty and what kind of position to give him." After saying that, Duke Georgie's face revealed a complicated expression. There was fear, vigilance, and relief. In any case, for the current situation in Lincoln City, he would not be stingy with his praise and rewards for anyone who could help stabilize the situation. The only problem was, what if this person's influence was too strong and threatened his ruling position? Alexander was also thinking about this problem with his brows knitted. After a full 5 minutes, he carefully probed, "I have an idea. What do you think about ousting Ian Lockett?" "Ian?" Georgie subconsciously shivered and accidentally pulled out a strand of his beard. He stared at the other party with a surprised look. He could not believe that this sentence came from the mouth of the current patriarch of the Alvey family, who had always been known for being conservative and cautious. Seeing that Georgie did not immediately object, Alexander quickly lowered his voice and explained, "That's right, it's Ian. I believe you should know very well that the Lockett family's greatest advantage is their navy and shipbuilding. However, after this disaster, they have already lost more than 50% of their assets and private soldiers. I'm afraid they don't have the strength to hold on to the position of Duke. Moreover, judging from the performance of that giant ship just now, our young genius has the ability to replace Ian and become the overlord of Linton City's shipbuilding industry. We can also reap enough benefits from it. Don't you think that sacrificing a rapidly declining family in exchange for the favor of a rising star is a business that is sure to be profitable and not lose money? Also, I have to remind you that the food that the entire city is eating is provided by him, so we have to make him feel sincere enough." Perhaps you have a point. Duke Georgie's eyes flashed with a cold glint as he nodded thoughtfully. Although the 4 dukes had ruled Linton City together for hundreds of years, this did not mean that there were no conflicts between them, especially with the rise of maritime trade. The Lockett family had almost monopolized 60% of the shipbuilding industry, which was extremely enviable. However, due to the family's large proportion in the Navy, no one dared to have any ideas about them. However, it was different now. With the complete destruction of the huge naval fleet and the looting of the shipyards around the port, Duke Ian Lockett quickly turned from a powerful figure to a weak giant. It was said that he had suffered a severe mental blow and hid in the manor in the suburbs alone. He had not seen anyone for more than half a month. Evidently, in the eyes of the other three dukes who had suffered lesser losses, Ian Lockett was no longer worthy of being on equal footing with them. There were even many powerful nobles who were eager to take a step forward and take the opportunity to ascend to the throne of a duke. After seriously considering the feasibility, Duke Georgie took a deep breath and asked softly, "Have you asked Loretta Botan for his opinion on this matter? Has he agreed?" That's right, old friend. Loretta Botan's completely agrees with this suggestion. Now it's 3 dukes against 1 duke, and with the support of the Mage Association behind that genius, I'm afraid the Lockett family will be completely wiped out this time. A sinister smile appeared on his face as he spoke. He was like a devil that had crawled out of hell, looking so cunning and greedy. All right, since the 2 of you have reached a consensus, count me in as well. Duke Georgie chose to join without hesitation, forming an alliance with the other 2 dukes. He knew very well that Ian was definitely dead this time. Instead of watching from the sidelines, he might as well rush in and take a share of the loot. Due to the pirates' prolonged blockade of the port, the nobles and merchants in Linton City had suffered great losses. Even the dukes were no exception. Therefore, they urgently wanted to find a fat and weak prey to pounce on and bite, making up for their losses by devouring the other party's flesh and blood. Unfortunately, Duke Ian Lockett, who had suffered the greatest loss in this disaster, became the perfect target. He probably did not realize that a disaster was about to fall from the sky. After secretly deciding on the plan to eradicate the Lockett family in the lighthouse, the 2 dukes quickly informed their trusted aides and began to lay out their plans in secret. With their ruthlessness, since they had decided to take action against a family, they would definitely not leave any loose ends behind. Therefore, before taking action, they had to investigate the Lockett family's properties, family members, and secret hiding places. They had to kill them in one blow, so as to prevent any fish from escaping and coming back for revenge in the future. Following Andre's return, the stagnant Linton City quickly became turbulent. Be it enemies or allies, everyone was guessing what shocking move he would make. Only the ignorant commoners stood by the shore and cheered in high spirits. In their eyes, the Eye of Arcane was a hero that had defeated the pirates, their savior. Once the trade route was opened up again, their difficult days would definitely turn for the better. Chapter 944. There was no mercy, and even less pity. After the Eye of Arcane pretended to chase after the fleet led by Grace, it immediately turned around and began to fire at the enemy ships that had lost their ability to move. It didn't take long before they were all sent to the bottom of the sea. The crew members who were addicted to killing even used their guns and crossbows to shoot at those who fell into the water. Blood and corpses soon floated everywhere. According to the laws of most coastal cities in the south, pirates weren't considered humans at all. They were monsters like goblins, kobolds, orcs, half-orcs, ogres, and trolls. If they were caught, there was no need to go through trial. They could be killed or reduced to slaves directly. It was obvious that this massacre was deliberately done by Bartholomew for the civilians on the shore at sea. It was a disguised form of flattery. He knew that when Andre returned to Linton City this time, he had to take into consideration the status and power that matched his own strength. Thus, the public opinion became a very important benchmark. It was important to know that the public opinion was a very mysterious thing. If someone without a foundation obtained it, not only would they not be able to benefit from it, they might even attract a fatal disaster. However, if someone with great strength obtained it, they would immediately rise rapidly and become a big shot that everyone would look askance at. There was no doubt that Andre now belonged to the latter. Whether it was his identity as a level 12 wizard and the Flaming Duke, or the conservative nobles who were united around him, as well as the strong support of Master Boris, the president of the Association of Mages, it all meant that he had the qualifications to become one of the highest rulers of this city. The only shortcoming now was that he wasn't a native of Linden City. He had to find a way to gain the recognition of the people, and a massacre of pirates was just enough to satisfy the desires of the ordinary people. As a qualified retainer, Bartholomew was more eager than anyone else for the person he was loyal to reach the peak of power. This way, his status would also rise accordingly. Under his orders, the huge gunship circled the harbor twice until it killed the last unlucky pirate before slowly docking on the plank road near the pier. Fortunately, Linton City was a natural harbor with an average depth of more than 10 meters. Otherwise, it might not be able to dock such a 2,000-ton super warship. Feeling the deafening cheers from the entire dock, Andre jumped down from the deck with an indifferent expression on his face. Under the gazes of tens of thousands of people, he walked unhurriedly into the city. However, before he could walk more than 10 meters, he saw a group of soldiers rushing in front of him, forcibly separating the crowd. Following that, 3 men in ceremonial robes and scepters alighted from the luxurious carriages behind them. They were none other than the supreme ruler of this city, the Duke. Behind them were many influential nobles and merchants in the city. The long line of carriages stretched for hundreds of meters. It was obvious that almost all of the important missions in Linton City were here. Welcome back, our genius mage and potion master. On behalf of the City Council, I would like to thank you for defeating the pirates. You are the hero of this city, the hero of all of us. As soon as Duke Georgie Bridle's feet touched the ground, he hurriedly stepped forward and gave Link a warm hug, loudly praising him. He wanted to send a signal to the ignorant people that the City Council had not been completely defeated. The nobles still had enough power to protect the safety of the port and the waterway. It couldn't be helped. After losing the huge navy, the merchants seemed to be gradually losing confidence in Linden City. If not for the pirates blocking the way outside, some of them would have already thought of ways to transfer their wealth. In order to prevent the huge decrease in trade and the lack of tax revenue, he had to use some small tricks to give everyone a shot of confidence. At the very least, he could ensure that the situation would not worsen. Duke Alvin followed closely behind and gave Link a hug, enthusiastically echoing, "That's right. We heard that you piloted this giant warship and heavily damaged Baccarat City, sinking their navy and capturing their merchant ships. You are the well-deserved protector of this city. I propose that we cheer for the protector. Long live the hero of Linton City. With such an invincible warship, we will definitely win this trade war. Let those damn pirates eat shit. Hang them. Kill all the pirates. They don't deserve to live." Under the instigation of the two dukes, the citizens who had been suppressed for a long time finally couldn't help but burst into fanatical cheers. They waved their arms like crazy, and if it weren't for the soldiers stopping them, they would have swarmed up and raised their heroes high up in the air to celebrate. Loretta Botones glanced at the ordinary people who were being played in the palm of her hand with disdain. She then whispered in Andre's ear, "Welcome back, my dear opponent. How is it? It feels good to be a hero, doesn't it?" "Hero? I don't think I'm a hero. All of this is just a political show, just like what you did before, isn't it? Also, I brought back a little surprise. I hope you won't be too surprised later." Andre's eyes flashed, lowering his voice and not backing down. He now had enough power to fight against this hidden archmage, so whether it was his tone or his attitude, it was a lot tougher. Loretta was keenly aware of this. His pupils instantly contracted, and an abnormal flush appeared on his face. He stuck out his tongue, greedily licked his lips, and let out a low and hoarse laugh. Hee, awesome. I didn't think that in just a few months you would grow to this extent. You know, I can't hold back the excitement in my heart. I want to have a face-to-face battle with you as a mage." Andre smiled confidently and replied in a low voice, "Don't worry, there are still a few months before the game officially begins. In this period of time, You will slowly see what I can do. Let's have an appetizer before our face-to-face battle. Very good. I look forward to your surprise, and I look forward to your appetizer even more. After saying this, Loretta retracted his invasive gaze and once again disguised himself as a proud noble. But Andre noticed that his right hand in his pocket had been twitching slightly. It was an obvious sign that he was extremely excited. Chapter 945. The enthusiastic cheers lasted for a full 5 minutes before they began to die down. Once the crowd had completely quieted down, Georgie immediately asked Andre with a smile, "Our hero, don't you want to say a few words to the citizens who supported you?" "I'm sorry, Your Grace. You should know that I'm a man of action through and through. I'm better at proving myself with my actions than speeches. It just so happens that I have a special guest on my ship. Would you like to hear what he has to say?" Andre then turned around and pointed at General Zack, who was standing alone at the bow of the ship. Loretta's eyes instantly lit up, and his face was so gloomy that it looked like it could drip water. He only needed one glance to recognize who it was. As a most trusted general of Commander Neemiadina, the supreme ruler of Bacaro City, Zack was well known throughout the southern city-states. Anyone with a bit of knowledge would be able to recognize him easily. Since he was on Andre's ship, it could only mean one thing. Bacaro City had lost the war. For a moment, all the nobles, including the dukes, fell into a terrifying silence. It wasn't that they didn't want to believe it, but it all sounded too unbelievable. After all, the enmity between Lincoln City and Bacaro City wasn't just a matter of a day or two. It had a history of more than 100 years, and they had fought dozens of times without a clear victor. In everyone's eyes, the outcome of these two city-states was definitely not something that could be decided in 1 or 2 battles. It should be more like a long-distance race, requiring decades or even centuries of intense competition until one side collapsed due to exhaustion. Only then would the curtains be drawn. Feeling the extremely strange atmosphere around him, General Zack knew that it was time to fulfill his duty. He tidied up his appearance and jumped down from the deck. He held up the parchment scroll with Neemiadina's seal and quickly walked up to Georgie Bridle, placing one hand on his chest as he bowed. "Greetings, Your Grace. I represent the Bacaro City Council to submit a letter of surrender to you and announce our permanent withdrawal from the sea. We will never build another ship. In addition, we are willing to submit to His Excellency Andre and become his vassals." This sentence was like a huge rock being thrown into a calm pool of water, instantly causing an uproar. Gods above, am I hallucinating? Bacaro City had actually admitted defeat. This is something that we haven't been able to do for over 100 years. A noble old man who looked to be in his 80s was holding a walking stick. He was so excited that his entire body was trembling. Another slightly younger man touched his chin and muttered to himself uncertainly. Could it be fake? Hasn't our navy been annihilated? Why do they surrender? Where are their Griffin Knights? Damn it, I think there must be a conspiracy. A noblewoman who looked to be in her 30s whispered to her husband, "Don't worry, my dear. The dukes haven't said anything yet. Let's wait and see." The noblewoman's husband gently patted his wife's hand and stretched his neck, trying to see what was written on the sheepskin. Seeing that the situation was slowly spiraling out of control, Duke Georgie hurriedly took the sheepskin scroll and tore off the wax seal to quickly read the contents. The more he read, the more shocked he became. In the end, he even revealed an incomparably shocked expression. This was because there was a title that made countless people tremble in fear. The Flaming Duke. Duke Alexander, who was watching from the side, saw it as well. He stole a glance at Andre from the corner of his eye, beads of sweat appearing on his forehead. Just as Lorton was about to open his mouth to say something, a tall youth with eyes sharper than an eagle's suddenly squeezed out of the crowd. Without a word, he took off his white gloves in front of countless people and threw them at Andre's face. At the same time, he roared angrily, "Brat, do you think no one will find out after you secretly kill my father? Let's duel. I'll use your blood to wash away the humiliation of the Brest family." However, It was a pity that before the gloves could reach Andre's face, they were stopped by the orc bandit Del, who was hiding in the shadows. The orc bandit stared at the young man with provocative eyes, waiting for an order to slit the young man's throat. In fact, it wasn't just him. The dwarf warrior Angel, the female knight Camellia, the dark knight Yvette, and the barbarian warrior Clive, who had always had a fiery temper, all quickly drew their weapons and surrounded the enemy in a fan formation. Their eyes were filled with ferocity, as if they were ferocious beasts ready to devour their prey. It had to be known that they were all professionals above rank 6. Once they started fighting, it would be impossible to stop them without at least 100 or 200 elite soldiers. As for Eunice, she drew the sword of the king's blood and pointed it at the youth, using a cold voice to threaten. "Idiot! Draw your sword and accept your death. I'll let you know the consequences of offending my master." The sudden conflict caught everyone off guard, especially Duke Georgie, whose face was twitching nonstop. Through the contents of the letter of surrender, he already knew that the youth in front of him was the messenger of destruction and destruction, the infamous Flaming Duke. Now, someone actually dared to recklessly provoke him. He was simply tired of living. Duke Alexander also stared at the youth with an idiotic expression because he had already recognized that this guy was none other than the eldest son of Blood Marquis Kyrgyz, Dandy. It was obvious that he had divined the news of his father's death through some special method and had specially come to cause trouble, wanting to kill his enemy in the name of a duel. It had to be said that this was an absolutely foolish action because he didn't know that Andre was already a rank 12 wizard. If the two really fought, it wouldn't even take a minute to determine the victor. Ha 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 ha. Interesting. This is really too interesting. Should I sigh at how lucky you are? Or is your opponent too stupid? Loretta laughed wildly as he asked Andre. As one of the dukes, he naturally knew about the promise that Georgie and Alexander had made in private when they had borrowed food. But the problem was that before they could kill him, the idiot Dandy had delivered himself to them and even took the initiative to provoke them. Now, Andre didn't even need to think of an excuse. He could directly crush his enemy like a bug. Chapter 946. I don't know. Maybe I'm really favored by the goddess of luck? Andre shrugged his shoulders indifferently, his eyes full of ridicule and ridicule. Although he didn't know who instigated this young man to test him, it didn't stop him from enjoying the pleasure of taking revenge on his enemy. After all, when he encountered the Kyrgyz fleet, he almost lost his life. Especially the powerful and strange ability of the King of Ghosts, Navid Rustam. Even now, he still trembled in fear when he thought about it. Din didn't know that he was in trouble, and he still said in an arrogant tone, 3 days later, on the outskirts of Linton City, bring your private army and allies. Let's have a real battle between nobles. In the name of the god of war. Only one of us is destined to survive. Ha! As you wish, 3 days later at noon, we will have a battle between nobles on the outskirts of Linton City. The winner gets everything, and the loser loses everything. With that, Andre took the white glove from the orc Del and threw it directly at the young man's face. In order to completely anger and humiliate the other party, he deliberately used the supermodel technique, instant cast. Silently, he used a level 0 arcane spell to change the material of the glove, turning it from a soft piece of cloth to something as hard as stone. Everyone only heard a bang, and Din, who couldn't dodge in time, screamed. His whole face was instantly splashed with blood. Fortunately, the physical fitness of a knight was far better than that of an ordinary person. Otherwise, this blow would have given him a concussion. Covering his bleeding nose, his eyes quickly became bloodshot, and without saying a word, he rushed up to take revenge. But before Din could get within 10 meters of Andre, he was stopped by a man in a linen robe and barehanded. This man swung his fists at a speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. His fists landed on his opponent like raindrops, making popping sounds like beans being fried. In the blink of an eye, a powerful knight was beaten to the ground, vomiting blood. He was none other than Celeste, the warrior monk summoned from the wizard card. Of course, the monks on Orire were not directly related to the monks on Earth. Their way of training was more similar to that of ascetics. That is, they gave up material comforts and used their whole life to temper their bodies in pursuit of spiritual peace and satisfaction. It was precisely this dual tempering of the body and mind that allowed the monk to gain unparalleled attack speed. Even thieves, who were known for their dexterity, had to admit defeat. They did not wear any armor or defensive equipment, nor did they use any weapons other than clubs. Most of the time, they could defeat monsters like ogres and trolls with just their fists. If Celeste were to fight against a fully armed knight, he might not be able to gain any advantage. However, if the knight was neither wearing armor nor unsheathing his sword, then even if there were 10 of them, Celeste would be able to easily overpower them. Looking at the embarrassed young man, Andre stretched out his right hand and patted the young man's face with a very insulting gesture under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes. Remember, no matter who asked you to provoke me today, tell him for me that don't use this method a second time. Otherwise, I don't mind making them all disappear, whether it's their soul or their body. As for you, poor thing, enjoy the next 3 days, because after 3 days, you and your family will forever become history. Bah! Hee. You think you've won? No. You don't understand who you're going against. Din spat out the blood in his mouth and retorted with a ferocious expression. I don't want to know, and I don't need to know, because after 3 days, I will show my true identity to the entire Linton City. I hope you won't be scared to the point of peeing your pants. Get lost. I don't like to talk to idiots. After saying that, Andre waved his hand at his followers, indicating for them to let him go. Otherwise, with the few followers that Den brought, he wouldn't be able to leave alive. Perhaps it was because he had suffered a great loss, but Din didn't continue to provoke him. He just glared at him viciously, wiped the blood from his mouth, turned around, squeezed through the crowd, and disappeared into the carriage at the end of the street. Following behind him were more than 20 angry nobles. Without asking, they were definitely the former allies of the Blood Marquis Kyrgyz. After watching these fellows who had been sentenced to death leave, Andre turned his head and smiled at George and other allies behind him, saying, "Everyone, did you hear that? I just came back, and an idiot gave me a generous gift. Who knows what the Brest family's assets are? I have to make some preparations in advance, or else I'll be in a hurry to take over so many assets all at once." As soon as these words came out, it immediately caused a burst of laughter. Lady Anasta of Western Xia was laughing so hard that she couldn't catch her breath and teased, "Don't worry. If you don't have enough people, I'll be happy to lend you a few butlers first." Ha ha ha. That's right. As a family with hundreds of years of history, we have enough butlers to help you through any difficulties at any time. In addition, as far as I know, the Brest family's main assets are focused on maritime trade. Since they lost most of their ships, they only have 2 large manors left, 1 mansion in the noble district, 1 warehouse, and 4 shops. As the leader of the conservative nobles, George knew most of the assets of the nobles in the city like the back of his hand. He didn't even have to specifically investigate and could reveal Din's background. There is no doubt that Andre's allies had developed an almost blind trust in him ever since they learned of what had happened at Bakarov City. In their eyes, even the renowned Griffin Knights had been crippled, let alone a mere Brest family. Georgie obviously felt this unusual atmosphere and frowned subconsciously. "Are you sure you want to duel with Din outside the city? He has a lot of allies behind him, especially those radicals who have suffered heavy losses. They will definitely turn out in full force. Your Excellency, please don't worry. Do you think I'll give in to a mob for nothing? Moreover, General Zach is still waiting for your reply. It's not our way of treating guests to keep them waiting." With that, Andre stretched out his left index finger and waved in the air. In an instant, a dark blue flame that symbolized the prince of fire elements, Aesop Desir, appeared in front of the 3 dukes. Although it lasted for a very short time, they all discovered the terrifying energy contained in it. In particular, Loretta, who was an archmage, immediately released a dangerous aura and did not hide the scorching light in his eyes. Obviously, he was about to lose control of his mental excitement and might suddenly make a move in the next second. Chapter 9:47. Andre narrowed his eyes as he saw the expression on Duke Loretta's face getting crazier. He reminded him meaningfully, "My dear Duke Loretta, you haven't forgotten our agreement, have you?" No, 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 of course I haven't forgotten. I'm just a little excited. I think you can understand, can't you? Loretta quickly put away the dangerous look in his eyes and put on a harmless smile. Because the time was very short, and the other two dukes were attracted by the deep blue flames, they didn't notice the abnormality he had just shown. However, President Boris, who was standing a little further away, was keenly aware of the magic fluctuation that had flashed past. A strange look flashed in his eyes, and he silently noted it down in his heart. He planned to investigate the other party's background when he returned. After all, there were so many spellcasters in Lincoln City, and almost every one of them had a file in the Association of Mages. However, none of these files belonged to Loretta. Why would a duke at the top of the pyramid of power hide his spellcasting level? Just thinking about it made one feel incredulous. With President Boris's terrifying intelligence, he could connect many of the strange things that had happened recently. After confirming that Loretta didn't intend to attack immediately, Andre's tense nerves relaxed a little. He replied calmly, "Of course, I can understand that anyone who sees the deep blue flames will inevitably be a little excited. But please take note, try not to do anything that will cause me to misunderstand. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I won't take some extreme defensive measures." "No problem. I apologize for my behavior just now. In order to show my sincerity, I've decided to hold a celebratory banquet especially for you. How about 3 days later? I believe that after slapping those annoying flies, you'll need to relax and relieve your fatigue from the journey." With that, Loretta leaned forward slightly and bowed elegantly. Although he didn't quite understand what he was doing, Andre still nodded politely. "Sure, I'm happy to accept your apology and invitation. I hope your banquet won't be as boring as ordinary banquets." "Hee hee, don't worry. I'll definitely arrange something special to liven things up. I guarantee that you won't feel bored. You have given me 2 surprises in a row today. Naturally, I have to give you 2 surprises in return." After saying this, Loratan turned around and jumped into the carriage, leaving without a second thought. Obviously, he had felt a strong threat from Andre and could no longer play the game of cat and mouse like he did a few months ago. Duke Georgie glanced at the gorgeous carriage that was rushing toward the city center and asked in a low voice, "Do you have a grudge against Loretta? It feels like the conversation between the two of you is like a collision between a sword and a knife. Sparks are about to fly." Andre shook his head and replied with a smile, "No, you're mistaken. Mr. Loretta and I are just playing an interesting game. He used to have the upper hand, but I just took the advantage, so he was a bit too excited. Instead of worrying about this, why don't you just decide on the surrender document? You should know that there are still many people waiting for you to announce the result." "Just a game?" Duke Alexander raised his eyebrows, disbelief written all over his face. "Just a game." Andre didn't want to linger on this topic, so he emphasized it again in an extremely confident tone. To a certain extent, he was not lying because in the eyes of the undying king, letting 2 talented juniors compete against each other was originally a game. It was also a tradition of wizards. Only in such an intense competition, the young wizard's mind and mind would grow rapidly and finally become a powerful spellcaster who could take charge of an area. As for whether Linton City and its surrounding areas would become a dead city due to this cruel trial, it was not within the scope of his consideration. Seeing that he couldn't get anything out of Leyland, Duke Georgie didn't want to waste any more time. He raised the surrender document in his hand and shouted to everyone, "Ladies, gentlemen, this surrender document was personally signed by the Bacaro City Council. It has the seal of Great Commander Nehemiah. I now officially announce to all of you, the trade war is over. Baron Andre has defeated our old rival. He has won us victory. Cheer loudly. Cheer for our hero. Cheer for victory. Starting from tonight, the entire Lincoln City will celebrate for a day. There will be free drinks and food later." As soon as he finished speaking, the docks were instantly engulfed in a sea of excitement. Countless people who had lost their minds broke apart from the army and ran wildly through the wide streets of the city. News of Bokaro City's surrender spread throughout the city in less than half an hour. As more and more people walked onto the streets, the celebration finally began. However, this had nothing to do with Andre, as he was busy looking at the information that appeared in his vision. Large-scale mission. Trade war completed. Congratulations. Your faction has obtained a perfect victory. You have obtained 50,000 experience points. You have obtained the metamagic ability. Spell maximization. When casting spells, the maximum value will be automatically selected. For example, damage-type spells will have the maximum damage, and the duration of spells will be extended to the theoretical maximum. However, the disadvantage is that it will consume high-grade spell slots to memorize, just like instant spells. You have obtained a level 5 spell scroll. Spell permanence. Permanently enchant a target with a spell. You've obtained a level 5 spell scroll. Mind Link creates a spiritual field that connects yourself and your allies, allowing everyone to communicate without speaking or making any movements. After reading all the information, 2 exquisite magic scrolls suddenly appeared in Andre's hands that were hidden in his sleeves. He didn't even look at them before stuffing them into the scroll box at his waist. He then asked Amos in his mind, "Did you create these things? What's the point of doing this?" "Yes, all the experience points and mission rewards were created after I drew energy from them. The purpose of this is to cultivate your abilities in all aspects, including combat skills, casting speed, thinking methods, and so on. You will accumulate enough experience in every mission." Without hiding anything, Amos directly answered the question with its metallic voice. It was like a dutiful teacher, guiding its master on the path of magic until it reached the end. Chapter 948. Obviously, Andre didn't like the feeling of being controlled. He immediately retorted in a questioning tone. "Are you sure this will train me? Why do I feel like it's more like a bottleneck that's preventing me from quickly increasing my spellcasting level? If you can allocate more energy to me, I can reach level 13 as a sorcerer and master the level 7 arcane spells that countless sorcerers dream of. I'm sorry, but unlike Mogadishu, I don't have the right to make decisions independently. All of my rules of conduct have been decided the moment I was created. It cannot be changed, and there is no room for compromise." This was because, according to the creator's theory, humans were complex and sensitive intelligent creatures. Their endless desires and fragile emotions would always affect their rationality. Only through both material and spiritual motivation could humans continue to move in the right direction. Although I can feel that your calmness and rationality are more than 70% based on your actions, it's inevitable that you will occasionally be impulsive. My responsibility is to reduce the chances of such situations occurring by assigning all kinds of missions to you. Amos' explanation was both direct and crude. He even mercilessly exposed the most fundamental aspect of human nature. Perhaps in his eyes, most humans were just a bunch of pitiful creatures controlled by their desires. They lived their lives in mediocrity, not understanding what they truly needed until the day they died. Of course, this situation wasn't entirely the fault of human nature. It was a unique feeling that slowly evolved in the process of biological evolution. For example, when reproducing, humans could obtain unparalleled pleasure from mating. This was because reproduction could ensure the continuation and expansion of the entire race. Another example would be eating sweets that were rich in calories. People would feel happy and enjoy it because the sugar in sweets could bring more energy. Similarly, salty food could make people feel that food was more delicious because it could bring the necessary salt to the body. On the other hand, there were symptoms of pain, nausea, dizziness, and other discomforts. For example, when the body was injured, any normal person would immediately feel pain. This pain would remind them which part of the body was the problem. Generally speaking, if a person's pain nerves failed, it would be difficult for them to live for too long. Without pain, they wouldn't know that they were injured. Perhaps by the time they realized it, they would have already died from excessive blood loss. In addition, when humans saw cockroaches, flies, and rats, they would instinctively feel disgusted and want to stay away. This was because they carried bacteria and viruses that were harmful to the human body. If they were infected, it would lead to terrible consequences. In short, the magical nature, through regulating certain mechanisms in the human body, allowed them to act in a way that was beneficial to them as much as possible. However, these sensory pleasures made humans unknowingly addicted to them. Only a few individuals who could control their desires would use their energy in other aspects to stand out among their own kind and become geniuses praised by countless people. As a soul from the information age, Andre knew how difficult it was to suppress desire. Just think about it. If a person was always surrounded by countless beauties, delicacies, fine wine, money, and authority, would he still continue to hide in an empty mage tower and endure the loneliness and boredom alone, studying profound magic day and night? Obviously, 99% of people would not choose the latter, especially when hormones were secreted in large quantities. Strong urges would dominate the brain, causing them to involuntarily have sex. Perhaps it was just like the saying that no matter if it was a man or a woman, they were all animals that thought with the lower half of their body. That was why in the ancient magic civilization, so many mages chose to transform themselves into liches. This way, they could completely get rid of their desires and focus on magic research. After thinking through all these, Andre understood that Amos's creator was right. He did need a supervisor to ensure that he stayed away from temptation and walked on the path of magic unswervingly. So he took a deep breath and said in his mind, "I think I understand. Continue to carry out your duties." Thank you very much for your understanding. You should know that for a mage, although the level of a profession is a very important yardstick, knowledge and experience are also very important. You are now a level 12 mage and have mastered the power of level 6 arcane spells, but your foundation is still relatively weak. You haven't even personally participated in large-scale magic experiments and high-level magic items. I personally think that you should stop leveling up as a mage and focus on this aspect. It's best to try to create a magic statue or modify a living body. It can greatly improve your understanding of the transformation of matter and energy. Amos used its metallic voice to give a pertinent suggestion in his mind. Although it was only a consciousness that thought independently, its attainment in magic was definitely not much worse than any legendary mage. Understood. After getting rid of those annoying flies, I will calm down and personally create a magic statue. A magic statue that is unique and different from any previous form. After saying this, Andre withdrew his consciousness from his mind and returned to the banquet that was being held in the city hall. Ever since the news of the surrender of Bakarov City had spread to every household, everyone had fallen into a state of blind optimism. Under Duke Georgie's suggestion, this impromptu banquet was held. Most of the participants were nobles and merchants in the city. Their purpose was simple, and that was to get to know Andre, who was in the limelight. After all, the only thing that could protect Linton City from the pirates was the Eye of Arcane that was docked at the docks. Therefore, whether it was for the safety of their own property or to inquire about those powerful cannons, these people had all sorts of motives. Not long ago, there was even a person in charge of a merchant group who hoped to hire the Eye of Arcane to escort their merchant ship. But unfortunately, Andre did not even think about it and rejected the other party's proposal. Now that most of the pirates were under the control of the Alliance, how could he ruin the entire plan for a little benefit? Apart from that, countless noble ladies and socialites also made Andre feel very uncomfortable. Their gazes were like a pack of hungry wolves that wanted to swallow him alive. Fortunately, he was prepared and had brought his fiancée, Chloe, with him. Otherwise, he might have been cornered in a deserted corner and become the wolves' dinner. Chapter 949. Hey, my dear, you don't seem to like this kind of occasion, do you? Chloe blinked and asked. She was wearing a white corset and a long skirt, white lace gloves, and white stockings. She looked beautiful and sexy. Other than being a little thin, there was basically no flaw. Of course, in the eyes of most people, this kind of body and face was a huge flaw. Although it was not ugly, it was definitely not as attractive as a voluptuous figure. But in Andre's view, Chloe was a woman who really met his aesthetic standards. Therefore, he kissed her soft lips and replied with a smile. That's right, I hate this kind of endless probing and social interaction. And I also noticed that you are the same as me, right? Hee hee. Yes, I hate to participate in this kind of boring banquet. There are no bards' performances, no clowns for fun, and no joyful singing and dancing. There are only boring probing and interest exchange. Chloe complained while holding her fiancé's arm. Although she was muddle-headed most of the time and belonged to the typical natural airhead or naive sweet, she had never made a mistake when it came to such a critical issue. Andre had always been very curious about what kind of tutor could teach such a strange student. Just when he was about to ask, he suddenly saw a pale young man not far away. It seemed that he had a conflict with Mabel. Both of their faces were red, and their hands were on the hilt of their swords, as if blood would splatter on the spot in the next second. Fiona was lying on the chair with her eyes closed and seemed to have fallen asleep. Damn it, why does trouble always find me? After cursing in a low voice, Andre hurriedly pulled Chloe, who was in high spirits, to the scene of the incident. He frowned and scolded. Everyone stop. Who can explain what exactly is going on? This bastard. He actually tried to drug Fiona's wine and even wanted to drag her into the opposite room. Mabel roared in anger. However, this was not surprising. After all, any elder brother who discovered that someone was actually trying to attack his younger sister would react very violently. He was already very rational not to pull out his sword and cut the other party into pieces on the spot. Hearing this, Andre's eyes instantly sharpened, and he released a terrifying aura. In just a few seconds, the surrounding temperature dropped by several degrees. As someone who was about to ascend to the peak of power in Linton City, how could he tolerate someone bullying his savior, let alone in such a despicable manner? The nobles who were more sensitive felt that the air around them was freezing and freezing. They could not help but shudder and look over. Especially the host of the banquet, Duke Georgie, who immediately abandoned a noblewoman in her 30s and hurriedly came over to persuade him. Calm down. My friend, please stay calm. No matter what happened just now, I promise to give you a satisfactory explanation. Explain? The corner of Andre's mouth slightly raised as he sneered. Your Excellency, do you know who these siblings are? They are my saviors. They were the ones who fished me out of the sea. They allowed me to escape the fate of drowning. I promised that I would give them a respectable status. From then on, they would be able to live a prosperous life, even if they did not have to do anything. But now, someone actually dared to use such despicable means at a banquet. I don't even want to know who he is or which family he is from. I only want to use his blood to wash away the humiliation these siblings have suffered. No need to waste words. Let's duel. Isn't that idiot planning to draw his sword anyway? Mabel turned around, her eyes revealing gratitude. She was not an idiot, and she knew very well what saying such words in such a situation meant. Sigh. All right, we'll do as you say. We'll settle this with a duel. Everyone, back off a little and make some space. These two gentlemen will engage in a duel to the death. Perhaps it was to curry favor with Andre, or for some other reason, but Duke Georgie did not attempt to dissuade them. Instead, he helped the guests clear out a large space. It was obvious that such actions were not normal. Anyone with a brain would be able to tell that there was a conspiracy brewing within. Andre was not an idiot, and he knew that he might have been set up. However, there was no way for him to back off now. He could only narrow his eyes and observe the development of the situation. He wanted to see who had the guts to play such tricks on him. After clearing out the space, Duke Georgie stood in the middle and said to the two youths who were about to engage in a duel to the death, "Remember, throwing weapons is not allowed. Insulting the other party is not allowed. Unrelated people are also not allowed to be used as shields. Do you understand?" Understood. Mabel nodded her head vigorously. He could feel the power of anger flowing through his veins. He could use his hands to tear the enemy into pieces. The youth's gaze was a little unfocused, but he nodded as well. Understood. Very good. I'll give you 1 minute to prepare. After 1 minute, the duel will begin. Georgie then took out an hourglass from his waist pocket and placed it on the table in front of everyone. It was a typical hourglass that lasted 1 minute. When the last grain of sand fell into the other side of the narrow bottleneck, the two youths could start fighting. Andre lowered his head and pondered for a few seconds. He then took 2 steps forward and whispered into Mabel's ear, "Don't hesitate. Kill your opponent immediately. If it's convenient, try to make the fight look bloody and cruel." Understood. Mabel clenched her fists and replied. In fact, he had originally planned to do so. Not long ago, he had even killed people and buried their corpses in order to protect his sister. 1 minute passed in the blink of an eye. As the last grain of sand fell, the unknown youth quickly drew his sword and stabbed towards his opponent at an extremely fast speed. He had obviously undergone strict swordsmanship training. His steps were light and steady, and his movements were extremely precise. As a non-professional, he was already considered to be quite good. However, it was a pity that he was facing Mabel, who had just become a rank 1 warrior. The latter did not use much strength and easily blocked the tip of the sword, which flickered with cold light. Taking advantage of the momentary pause caused by the youth's collision, Mabel drew her other great sword with a sinister smile and slashed down. Chapter 950. Puff. Accompanied by a strange sound, he, who had attacked with hatred, cleaved his opponent into 2 halves from the middle. The enemy's hands were severely carbonized, as if they had been corroded by strong acid. Without a doubt, the young man was as dead as he could be. The moment the magic greatsword, Graham, hit him, it triggered the supernatural power attached to it. He didn't even have time to scream. The scene was extremely bloody, especially the brain matter that spurted out from his skull. It was enough to make a normal person vomit out their dinner from the previous night. However, none of the nobles and merchants present vomited, not even the delicate noble ladies and madams. Some of them even had excitement and anticipation in their eyes. After all, Orire was a barbaric and ignorant world. Therefore, the ruling class here might be arrogant, cruel, lustful, greedy, shameless, and stupid, but they would never be weak. Although everyone at the banquet appeared to be polite and courteous, they had already killed more than 1 person in secret. Chloe had once revealed that when she was 12 years old, she was forced by her family's knight to execute a few bandits who blocked the road and robbed them. Looking at the tragic scene on the ground that looked like the scene of a car accident, Andre patted Mabel's shoulder lightly and gestured for her to step back. Then he took 2 steps forward and picked up a seal ring with the image of a stag beside the bloody corpse. A cold smile quickly appeared on his face. Oomph. The Lockett family? Who can tell me his relationship with Duke Ian? Dear, this guy is called Owen. He's Duke Ian's younger brother, Chloe reminded him softly. Duke Ian. Andre seemed to have thought of something and glanced at Georgie and Alexander meaningfully. He then bent down to observe the eyeballs of the corpses. As expected, he found traces of magic in the pupils of the corpses. After a normal person died, their pupils would dilate. However, for people who were under magic or illusions, their pupils would not dilate after death. Instead, they would shrink. This phenomenon would last for a few minutes to a few hours. Obviously, this unlucky guy called Owen had been used by someone to provoke a war between him and Duke Ian. With Andre's intelligence, it didn't take much effort for him to lock onto the 2 most suspicious people. Without any hesitation, he said to Georgie, "Your Grace, I think you need to explain something to me. Don't say that you don't know anything. That's not only insulting my IQ, but also insulting your own IQ, isn't it?" Now, even the surrounding guests could smell a conspiracy in the air. They all pricked up their ears, wanting to know what was going on. Could it be a civil war between the dukes? Georgie didn't seem to have any intention of hiding his intentions. He smiled and replied in a low voice, "Of course. I will give you a satisfactory explanation. Please come with me." In addition, leave your lovely fiancée outside. It's best not to let too many people hear the contents of your conversation. Wait a moment. I need to make some arrangements. With that, Andre turned around and gently kissed the girl's forehead. He whispered in her ear, "Bring Mabel and Fiona home immediately. Before I return, do not go out no matter what. I have a feeling that a storm is coming." Chloe had always been obedient to her fiancé. She nodded without hesitation. "Understood. I will take good care of them." "Good girl." After kissing the girl's cheek again, Andre went straight to Duke Georgie's side. "Lead the way, Your Grace. I can't wait to know what you and Duke Alexander are planning. You even want to drag me into it." Relax, my friend. I guarantee that this matter will only bring you benefits and no harm," Georgie said as he gestured for Benjamin to follow him. He then walked quickly to the reception room at the back of the hall. Alexander also threw away the wine glass in his hand and followed closely behind. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from everyone's sight. Seeing that the three most important characters of the banquet had left, the rest of the guests didn't have the mood to continue. After a while, they all left, leaving only the bloody corpse on the ground. The servants didn't dare to touch it because it was Duke Ian's younger brother. No one was willing to go near it. They didn't want to be involved in a terrible political storm. Just as Andre and the two dukes were spying, a man covered in a cloak and a hood was led by Benson to Black Lily's office. Bonnie, who had become the queen of Lincoln City's underground world, narrowed her eyes and sized him up. After a full minute, she asked, "I heard that you were looking for me." "Yes. My master wants you to send a message to Sir Andre. He hopes that he can make a trip to the cemetery on the west side of the city before midnight. This is the token." As he spoke, the man took out an exquisitely carved lion seal from his pocket and gently placed it on the table. He then bowed respectfully and turned to leave. However, before he walked out of the door, Bonnie stopped him. "Wait. How do you know that I can contact Mage Andre? You have to know that he is now the hero of this city, and I'm just a small gang leader." The man smiled slightly and said in a playful tone, "Madam, except for those ignorant civilians, everyone in Lincoln City knows that you are his lover, so please don't deceive yourself. Otherwise, do you think that you can control more than half of the slums with these motley crew? Even the city guards turn a blind eye to it? No, they are all afraid of Mage Andre. They are afraid of the huge force behind him and the terrifying potential he has shown. Don't worry, my master is not his enemy. He just wants to meet and see if he can make a deal. That's all." After saying this, the man pulled his hood hard and turned to disappear into the dim corridor. The thugs around didn't stop him because they didn't receive orders from their boss. Looking at the lion seal on the table, Bonnie directly asked the man standing beside her, "Scar, do you know this thing?" The latter picked up the seal and looked at it carefully for a few seconds. He quickly nodded. "Of course, this is the symbol of the Brest family. Only the direct members of the family are qualified to wear it." The Brest family? Didn't they just make an agreement with Andre a few hours ago to fight to the death outside the city 3 days later? Why are they suddenly playing this game now? Bonnie frowned and asked. As a gang leader, she had spies in every corner of the city. Such a big matter would be sent back through the intelligence network in 15 minutes at most and placed on her desk. Chapter 9:51. I can't be sure due to the lack of conditions, but for a family with such a long history, the internal strife has always been very fierce. Perhaps someone is dissatisfied with Den being the head of the family, or it could be some kind of deception before the war. Anyway, I think it's best to send the news to Sir Andre as soon as possible. With his wisdom, he'll definitely make a wiser judgment than us. The scarred man shrugged his shoulders and voiced his conjecture. At the same time, he gave a corresponding suggestion. After such a long period of understanding, he had almost figured out who the woman in front of him was, so he wasn't surprised at all. In the eyes of many people in high society, gangs were the kind of trash organizations that were dirty, despicable, shameless, and betrayals. They could be crushed with a flick of their little finger. However, in the Scar Man's eyes, the forces under Black Lily Bonnie had obviously exceeded the scope of ordinary gangs. They were developing into an underground union that gathered intelligence, assassinations, and infiltration. More importantly, this organization not only had a strong background, but also had many first-class industries with the ability to make money. Whether it was manpower, material resources, or financial resources, they didn't lack any of them. The only thing they lacked was time to settle down. Perhaps they looked very fragile at the moment, but as long as they settled down and developed for 10 years, they would definitely become a formidable behemoth. Of course, the premise of all this was that Andre, who was the backer, must not have any accidents. Otherwise, the nobles and merchants who had begun to feel threatened would immediately rush up and mercilessly tear the beginning of the scale of the slums into pieces. Black Lily Bonnie obviously understood this and nodded without hesitation. You're right. We're good at gathering information, not making decisions. Arrange a carriage immediately. I'll make a trip there myself. As you wish, boss. The Scar Man put one hand on his chest and bowed. Dragging his injured leg, he limped and disappeared into the corridor. 10 minutes later, a black carriage without any decorations set off from the slums and headed straight for the city hall. Soon, it disappeared into the dark night. At the same time, in a secret room behind the city hall, a conspiracy was in progress. You can explain now. As soon as they sat down, Andre urged with a cold face. He hated being used the most, so there was no respect in his tone at all. It was as if the person sitting in front of him was not the Duke who stood at the peak of power in Linton City. Georgie shook his head nonchalantly. Calm down, my friend. This is just a small misunderstanding. After all, what we're about to discuss is too important. I have to make sure that you sever all ties with the Lockett family, and blood feud is the safest option. After hearing this, Andre would be a complete idiot if he still didn't understand. There is no doubt that the conflict just now was completely manipulated by the two old foxes in front of him. Their target was none other than Duke Ian, who had suffered heavy losses recently. In other words, the Duke Alliance, which was originally a monolithic alliance, was now disbanded. Some people couldn't wait to devour their former allies in order to strengthen themselves. After thinking about this, Andre's lips curled up slightly, and he asked in a playful tone, "Interesting. If I'm not mistaken, are you planning to uproot Duke Ian and his family? By the way, is this considered killing each other?" "No, of course not. As an outsider, you don't seem to understand the selection mechanism of the Duke. The title of Duke of Linton City has never been hereditary. It is based on strength. Only the 4 nobles with the strongest comprehensive strength will be crowned with the title of Duke. However, our 4 families have a firm hold on a large amount of resources, so we have always been dukes for hundreds of years, giving everyone the illusion that the Duke will always belong to the 4 families. But now, Ian and his family have lost too much power and are no longer worthy of being called Duke. If he was smart enough, he would have voluntarily handed over the title and given up all the benefits in the city. He would have stayed in the manor obediently, slowly accumulating strength and waiting for the opportunity to rise again. But it was obvious that he didn't do that. He was still hoping to use the empty title to scare off those who were ready to take action. As a Duke, I will never allow this to happen, let alone allow those who are not strong enough to be on equal footing with us. Besides, we have to squeeze out some space for you, right? Honorable Flaming Duke." As he spoke, a meaningful smile appeared on Ian's face. He looked very much like a ruthless, experienced, and unscrupulous politician. However, he was more dangerous than the politicians on Earth, because politicians could not raise a large-scale private army. Andre knew that Ian was dragging him into this mess. As long as he participated in the operation against Ian, it would be equivalent to joining the Duke's alliance. After carefully analyzing the pros and cons in his mind, he sneered and spread out his hands. "All right, it seems that I have no reason to refuse. But there is one thing, I don't need the title of Duke. How about letting Lady Anastasia become the new Duke? What do you think?" Alexander stroked the beard on his chin and pondered for a moment, then nodded quickly. "Sure. After all, the title of Duke is yours. Whoever you want to be your spokesperson is your business. We won't interfere. It seems that you have made up your mind to inherit Master Boris's position as the president of the Mage Association. That's right. I've always been a mage, so I don't like to waste too much time on government affairs. Andre shrugged indifferently and openly admitted it. Ha ha. So, the misunderstanding between us has been cleared up, right? Duke Ian casually picked up a bottle of last year's wine from the shelf and poured a glass for everyone. Due to the limitations of the brewing technology, many wines were not better when stored for a long time. Take wine, for example. If it was stored for more than 3 years, it was very likely that it would directly turn into grape vinegar. Therefore, when entertaining guests, the newer the wine, the more popular it was. If in this world, wine that was decades or centuries old was used to entertain guests, such as a mysterious 1982 liquid, not only would it not be praised, but it would also be secretly despised. The guests were likely to think that you were trying to fool them with old vinegar. Gently sniffing the fragrance of the new wine, Duke Ian raised his glass and said loudly, "To our friendship and cooperation. Cheers! Cheers! Cheers!" Chapter 952. After discussing how to divide up the Lockett family's assets, Andre quickly left the city hall, intending to go back and make preparations. However, not long after he walked out of the door, he was stopped by a black carriage without any decorations. The person sitting in the driver's seat jumped down, bowed respectfully, and opened the door gently. He did not say a single word throughout the entire process. He was the epitome of silence is gold. As a level 12 mage, Andre could completely ignore most of the assassination attempts. Hence, he walked up without a second thought. However, he did not expect this at all. This kiss lasted until the two of them were about to suffocate before they reluctantly parted. Gazing at Black Lily's beautiful face, Andre asked with a smile, "Are you here to give me a surprise? Why am I not welcome?" Bonnie licked her lips and asked with heavy breaths, How could that be? I want to swallow a cute little lamb like you into my stomach right now." Saying that, Andre immediately pressed Black Lily down on the chair and started kissing her earlobes. At the same time, he inserted his hand into the gap of her leather jacket and unbuttoned it easily with his nimble fingers. In the blink of an eye, he had taken off her jacket. The inexperienced Bonnie only felt her mind go blank. She could not resist the other party's invasion at all. Before her last bit of rationality completely disappeared, she shouted at the coachman, "Terry, don't let the carriage stop where it is. It's too conspicuous." The coachman who received the order did not say another word. He immediately closed the door and returned to his seat. He quickly started the carriage and began to move around the streets of the city. Gently caressing his lover's smooth back, Andre teased in a half-joking tone, "Darling, what made you so thirsty that you couldn't wait to come to me?" Bonnie glared at him fiercely. Without another word, she opened her mouth and bit his shoulder, cursing loudly, "Damn it, you bastard! Scum! Do you know how sad I was when I heard that you were ambushed and killed a while ago? I'm really sorry for making you worry." Feeling the pain from his shoulder, Andre kissed his lover's cheek and hugged her tightly in his arms. He understood that this was Black Lily's way of expressing her love. Although it was a little barbaric, it gave people a warm feeling in their hearts. This was because only those who were closest to each other would use such an unscrupulous way to express their feelings and care for each other. "Promise me, there must not be a next time. Otherwise, I'll bite your flesh off next time." Bonnie took a deep breath and threatened. Andre laughed and shrugged. "No problem. I promise there won't be a next time." Obviously, this was a lie. As a mage, especially the owner of the Arcane Eye, how could he not be in danger? Once the gods who destroyed the ancient magic civilization found out about his true identity, they might immediately take the most drastic measures to nip the danger in the bud. To a certain extent, from the moment he came to this world, he was destined to walk with danger and death. But women, they were always more emotional than rational. Most of the time, all they wanted was a word of comfort. If a man was still so straightforward at this time, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. After using a simple magic trick to clean off the mucus and sweat on their bodies, the two quickly put on their clothes, pants, and shoes again. They sat on the chairs and enjoyed the night view of Linton City. After a full 3 to 5 minutes, Andre asked, "Don't you have anything to say to me? As far as I know, you're not the kind of woman who would make a trip just for Yuan." Bonnie took out a small booklet bound with parchment paper from under the chair. There was also a lion seal on it, and she stuffed it into Andre's hands. "Here, the notebook records everything that happened in Linton City after you left. The seal was sent by a sneaky man a few hours ago. He asked me to tell you that his master hopes that you can make a trip to the cemetery in the west of the city before midnight. I asked Scarface, and he said that this seal is a keepsake that only direct members of the Brest family can wear." "Oh, a direct member of the Brest family?" Andre raised his eyebrows in surprise. He checked the seal repeatedly and soon muttered to himself, "Interesting, this thing isn't fake but real. As far as I know, excluding the blood marquis Kyrgyz, there are only 3 direct members of the family, right?" After a few seconds of recollection, Bonnie immediately nodded. "Yes, they're the eldest son, Dan, the second son, Zebulun, and the youngest daughter, Susan. Since the status of women in this family has never been high, the last one can basically be ruled out. It's either Din's scheme or the second son, Zebulun, wants to get rid of his brother." "Tell me about Zebulun," Andre said as he flipped through the contents of the notebook. With his current intelligence, it was easy for him to do 2 things at once. When necessary, he could even do 3 or 4 things at once. As everyone knows, Zebulun was found to have talent as a mage when he was 5 years old. He then became the disciple of mage Gavin Lauren, and only recently has he started to appear in the public eye. According to my investigation, he went out to sea with his father a while ago, but for some reason, he suddenly fled back alone. After he came back, Zebulun went to the Mage Association once, probably to see his mentor, Gavin Lauren. The two seemed to have had an intense argument. My spies reported that he was in a very bad mood when he came out, and even killed a poor beggar with a magic missile. Bonnie's memory had always been excellent, and she easily described the details of the second son of the Brest family. Andre hesitated after hearing this, and immediately asked, "Are you sure he went out to sea with the Blood Marquis?" "Of course. I'm very sure. My people saw him with their own eyes, and they boarded the ship with a few people dressed as mages." Bonnie answered without thinking. "Interesting, Zebulun is actually a survivor of that disaster. Looks like I have to meet him no matter what, or at least find out his attitude." After muttering to himself, Andre immediately ordered the coachman, "Turn, take me to the cemetery in the west of the city immediately." Chapter 953. The graveyard in the west of the city was a special place within the protection of the city walls. It was similar to a public cemetery, but only those who had reached a certain level of identity, status, and wealth were qualified to be buried there. In fact, most of the areas in the graveyard had been divided by the nobles and transformed into family tombs for generations to rest in. Hence, there were tall and magnificent tombs, obelisks, and exquisite carvings everywhere. Many of them were created by masters. If anyone could steal all the burial items here, they would instantly gain wealth that could never be spent in a few lifetimes. Of course, the nobles were not idiots. They knew that there would be many tomb robbers waiting for the opportunity to spy on the burial items in the tombs. Hence, there was always an army of about 200 people stationed around the area. Once they discovered someone robbing the tombs, they would immediately take action. However, for some reason, when Andre entered the graveyard, he did not see any signs of patrolling. The carriage was unimpeded and came to the towering statue of the god of death in the center of the graveyard. Bonnie looked a little nervous. One of her hands was tightly gripping the dagger at her waist. After more than 3 months of training, she was already a decent thief. Although she was still a little immature in picking locks, stealing, and detecting traps, she was already qualified in terms of combat and stealth. Especially in terms of sneak attacks and assassination, she was much better than others of the same level. "Don't be nervous. Relax. We're here to negotiate, not to find trouble. Besides, even if there's a battle, You don't have to do anything. Andre lifted Black Lily's sexy chin and sucked on her tongue. He pushed open the door with a smile and jumped down from the carriage. With the dual abilities of night vision and secret vision, he quickly discovered that there was a living person standing behind the obelisk less than 10 meters away from him. Without any hesitation, he threw the lion seal in his hand at the obelisk. At the same time, he said sarcastically, "Come out, Mage Zebulon. I see you. Are you so afraid of me that you have to be so sneaky when meeting me? I'm sorry. I believe you should know very well how many pairs of eyes are watching us in the city, so I have to be careful. Moreover, I've seen it with my own eyes. You've used unparalleled strength to kill the Phantom King, and you've even vaporized the entire fleet as well as a large amount of seawater. Isn't it natural for you to remain fearful and humble when facing the Flaming Duke?" The figure hiding behind the obelisk caught the lion seal and slowly walked out of the darkness. It was the second son of the Blood Marquis, Zebulon. His face was extremely pale, and the bags and dark circles under his eyes showed that he had not slept for at least a week. For a mage, this was extremely fatal. In addition, his bloodless lips also indicated that this young man's body was in an extremely unhealthy state. If this continued, he would probably die suddenly without the need for others to do anything. "Were you on the ship?" Andre narrowed his eyes and asked. Zebulon took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, I was trapped in the cabin of the flagship. I was almost burned to ashes by the terrifying flames." This answer obviously did not satisfy Andre. He continued to ask, "Then how did you escape?" "If I remember correctly, the sea within a radius of a few hundred meters was engulfed by the flames. It's a magic item. Before I set off, I paid a huge price to exchange for a teleportation rune with Master Barsa of the Association. If my life was in danger, it would teleport me back to Linden City. That's why I was lucky to escape." Zebulon had no intention of hiding anything. He confidently revealed the secret of his survival in an attempt to gain the other party's trust. He knew very well how terrifying the young man standing in front of him was, so he did not plan to play any tricks from the start. When the difference in strength between the two parties reached a certain level, even the smartest person could not turn the situation around. Andre seemed to have noticed this. He smiled slightly and said in a praising tone, "Very good. You are one of the few people who know your place. At least you are much better than that arrogant mentor of yours. He never knew his place and always liked to play tricks with me, although these tricks almost cost me my life." Zebulon put one hand on his chest and bowed. He smiled bitterly and sighed. "Sigh, to tell you the truth, Gavin Lauren is no longer my mentor. We had a falling out." "Oh? Why?" Andre raised his eyebrows in surprise. Zebulon helplessly spread his hands and replied, "Because Gavin Lauren has been blinded by the position of president of the association. He even plans to drag the Brest family into the abyss. I believe you have already met my brother. What do you think of him? An impulsive, irritable, low-intelligence idiot." Andre did not even think about it and gave his evaluation. "That's right. Your description is very accurate. As the first successor, Dent does not have enough brains to deal with the complicated political struggles. After a long period of night training, he likes to use his muscles and swords instead of thinking. He always wants to use the simplest and most violent way to solve problems. I can't just watch him destroy the entire family. That's why I invited you out for a chat today." After probing each other for a long time, Zebulon finally revealed his intentions. Noble families had always been bound together for good or ill. He could not just watch the once glorious Brest family fall into ruin. Looking at Zebulon's nervous eyes, Andre laughed. It was a happy and unrestrained laugh. "Ha ha! Unfortunately, my dear Zebulon, I have already made an agreement with my brother. 3 days later, in the outskirts of Lincoln City, there will be a private battle to determine who will survive. It is said that the Church of the God of War will send a priest to notarize. The winner will get everything, and the loser will lose everything, including property, servants, slaves, and noble titles. Do you think I will give up on getting rid of my enemy with my own hands and so many benefits? Or do you think Dind has the ability to resist my attack, so you want to use him as a bargaining chip? I can tell you very clearly that the Brest family was destined to be destroyed the moment your father provoked me. No one can save it. I heard you have a very beautiful sister. I am looking forward to tasting her after I win, and then hire the best slave trainer to train her into a cute pet. Enough. I'm warning you. You are not allowed to touch my sister. She is innocent. Zebulon glared with his bloodshot eyes and roared crazily. Chapter 954. Seeing that the young man before him was about to lose control of his emotions, Andre's lips curled into a beautiful arc. He stretched out his finger and shook it lightly. No, 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 you're wrong. There's no one in this world who's innocent. Since your sister has enjoyed the benefits of her family, she must be prepared to die together with her family. Isn't that how many noble families educate their children? It was obvious that he had successfully grasped his opponent's weakness in the previous exchange. It was the youngest daughter of the Brest family, Agnes, who was only 15 years old. Outsiders would never have guessed that Zebulon, who had always been a playboy, was actually a sister con deep down in his bones. Anger, fear, nervousness, the helplessness of having his secret seen through. In just a few seconds, Zebulon felt as if he had been smashed in the head by an ogre. He lost all ability to think, and his whole body trembled uncontrollably. However, mages were mages after all. They had undergone strict training since they were apprentices. Some instructors even forbade their apprentices to speak for an entire year in order to train their self-control. They had to use their eyes, expressions, and gestures to express their intentions. Those who failed would be expelled immediately. Zebulon managed to regain his composure after a short while. He resisted the urge to punch his opponent in the face and asked through gritted teeth, "What do you want?" Andre pretended to smile proudly and spread his hands. "Haha, if I remember correctly, you were the one who suggested this meeting. So it's not what I want, but what you want. You know, you don't actually have a lot of bargaining chips in your hands, so you better think carefully before you make your offer. I hate endless bargaining." Obviously, even though he didn't use any threatening words in his entire sentence, there was no place where he didn't reveal a threatening intent. Negotiation and negotiation were essentially a game of finding each other's weaknesses. Once you found your opponent's weakness, you'd have to relentlessly attack and force them to submit, compromise, and then do things according to your own wishes. Any soft-heartedness would not only not earn you so-called friendship, but would also make you a laughing stock. When your opponent recovered, they would immediately seek revenge. As a mage who believed in the evilness of human nature, Andre never overestimated his own charm. What he needed to do was to divide his enemies into two categories. The first type could be reached if it did not involve core interests, and the other type could not be reached. The former type could be weakened first, and then taken in through negotiations. As for the latter type, it must be completely eradicated, leaving no trace of future trouble. Unfortunately, the Brest family undoubtedly belonged to the latter. Zebulon could feel the undisguised malice from the other party. He took a deep breath and clenched his fists. I don't want much. I just want Agnes to be safe and to keep the Brest family's name as a noble. You can take the rest of my wealth, status, and honor. For this, I'm willing to give up my freedom and swear to be loyal to you forever as a mage. Ha ha, I'm really sorry, but what makes you think I'll agree to this condition? You should know that it's all thanks to your idiot brother. 3 days later, I'll be able to get everything I want. As for you, you're just a level 3 mage. Once I succeed Master Boris as the president of the Mage Association, there will be more powerful mages willing to serve me. So, your value is not as high as you think it is. Lastly, and most importantly, how can you guarantee your loyalty? After all, I indirectly caused your father's death. Next, I'll kill your brother and completely destroy your family. Hatred is a terrifying force. I don't want to be hurt by it at all. Andre was like a devil luring mortals into depravity. Step by step, he dragged his prey into the trap he had set up beforehand, and then stood by the side to enjoy the sight of his prey struggling in pain. Perhaps it was just as the saying went, power never changed anything. It only exposed a person's true nature. Under the erosion of more and more power, Andre gradually became accustomed to giving orders and forcing those who were weaker than him to obey his will. Although he did not notice this at the moment, it had begun to affect many people, especially the young man who was on the verge of collapse. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! You're a devil in human skin. Tell me what it is you want. Zebulon finally couldn't hold it in any longer. Perhaps because he was too agitated, his entire face was flushed red. It was obvious that his blood pressure was rising. Andre's lips curled up slightly. He said in a playful tone, "My request is simple. Before I completely defeat your stupid brother, you have to end his life with your own hands. I don't care if you use poison or a dagger to stab him in the heart. It doesn't matter. But there must be enough witnesses at the scene. Remember, this promise is only valid before I defeat him. If I kill his army and subordinates, the promise will be null and void. Also, after this, your sister will become my hostage. Whether she lives well or not will depend on your performance in the future. Do you understand? You want me to be a kinslayer?" Zebulon fell to his knees and screamed. At this point, he finally understood Andre's goal. Andre wanted to use him to completely destroy the last resistance of the Brest family. He didn't even have to dirty his hands. After all, directly eliminating a noble family with a long history in front of so many people was a political risk. It might cause a certain degree of hostility and panic. However, if the family killed each other, people would only look down on the family's short-sightedness and despise their actions. Don't worry. You still have 3 days to consider. Think carefully before you give me an answer. Oh, right. Also, help me find out who instigated your brother. If the information is accurate, I will consider arranging a more comfortable environment for your sister in the future. Having said that, Andre patted Zebulon's shoulder lightly. He turned around and jumped into the carriage. He then ordered the coachman to turn around. In just a few minutes, he had left the eerie cemetery. Watching the carriage disappear into the distance, Zebulon seemed to have gone mad. He swung his fists and punched a tombstone until his hands were bloody. He slowly stood up and stared at the lion-shaped seal in his palm. With a firm tone, he said word by word, "Agnes, I swear to protect you, even if I have to sell my soul to the devil. I'm sorry, my brother." Chapter 955. Wow, amazing. I want to say that you're becoming more and more like a powerful noble. You actually managed to make the second son of the Brest family kneel and beg with just a few words. As soon as the carriage left the cemetery, the black Lily Bonnie couldn't wait to jump up from her chair and exclaim. As a woman who had climbed up from the bottom of the slums, she had never seen a negotiation where an opponent was toyed with just a few words and almost had a mental breakdown. Andre kissed her cheek and shook his head lightly. "No, my dear. You only saw the surface and didn't understand what caused that scene. Why don't you explain it to me? You know that I really like to learn." Bonnie pulled down her collar. Feeling the softness and warmth from his palm, Andre shrugged with a smile. "All right, since you're so delicious, I'll explain it to you a little. Listen carefully. First of all, the negotiation depends on the strength of both sides. This strength includes power, money, and reputation. It also includes one's profession level, talents, and so on. In this aspect, I'm countless times stronger than my opponent. Secondly, I've grasped Zebulon's weakness from the start, which is his only sister. As long as I use this to threaten him, he won't have any room to retaliate. Lastly, and most importantly, I'm smarter, more rational, and more insightful than him. Therefore, the outcome of this negotiation has long been decided. There won't be any changes at all. Also, I promise you that if he had dared to show even the slightest inclination to attack, he would have been burned to ashes by the endless flames." "Really?" Bonnie asked as she blinked her eyes playfully. Just as Andre was about to say something, the carriage suddenly stopped. The coachman, who had been silent all this time, jumped down and opened the door. He reminded with a hoarse voice, "Boss, we've arrived at Countess Anastasia's mansion." Glancing at the brightly lit mansion outside the window, Bonnie sighed helplessly. Sigh? Looks like we'll have to end our conversation here. What are your plans for the next few days? I'll return to Two-Ways Valley tomorrow and the day after, check on the situation in the territory and organize the army. You have to understand that private battles between nobles are not child's play, especially when it comes to etiquette. I have to make sure that no one can criticize me. After saying that, Andre straightened his clothes and jumped down from the carriage. He waved to Black Lily in the carriage and walked straight to the door. After watching him pass through the guards and enter the garden, Bonnie reluctantly said to the coachman, "Let's go home. I don't think the city will be too peaceful for the next few days. Try to keep a low profile. I don't want to cause trouble at this critical time." "Don't worry. Scarface has already ordered most of the people to retreat. Right now, no one in the slums can threaten us. As long as you agree, we can even instigate the city guard station nearby." The coachman drove the carriage while comforting his boss's slightly sensitive nerves. After a while, the carriage disappeared into the night. After passing through the quiet garden, Andre was quickly led to the front hall by a servant. Before he had time to take off his cloak, he found that everyone in the room was looking at him, especially the anxious Mabel. She stood up and stammered, I didn't cause any trouble for you, did I?" "Trouble? Ha ha. No, my friend, it's the opposite. This is a good thing." Andre passed the cloak to the butler and walked up to the young man, patting him hard on the shoulder. When the latter heard this, he instantly heaved a sigh of relief and muttered to himself, "Phew, thank the gods. I thought I'd gotten into big trouble again. Hee. I've already said that Andre will take care of everything. Now, let's continue to drink to our heart's content and make up for the losses at the banquet." Chloe, who had always been an optimist, raised her glass and took a big gulp of the best wine. Her fair face immediately flushed red, and she looked so cute and seductive. It was obvious that she was drunk, and even her eyes were a little blurry. She even forced Fiona, who was sitting next to her, to drink with her. From time to time, she would let out an ambiguous laugh or hum an unknown country song. Looking at her niece's drunken appearance, Countess Anastasia held her forehead helplessly and gave the old butler a look. Borg understood and immediately waved his hand. In the blink of an eye, two maids went forward and sent the young lady, who could not even remember her own name, back to her room. Seeing that the hall had finally quieted down, the Countess immediately asked impatiently, "What did Duke Georgie and Duke Alexander talk to you about? Don't tell me they want to start a war?" Andre sat down and took a sip of water. He replied meaningfully, "No, madam. On the contrary, they want to form an alliance with me and take over the Lockett family together. Also, please allow me to congratulate you. If nothing goes wrong, you will be conferred the title of the first Duchess in the history of Linton City by the Parliament in about 2 weeks at most." "What?" Perhaps because the news was too shocking, Countess Anastasia suddenly stood up from her chair with her eyes wide open. She could not believe that things would develop to this point. "Calm down, madam. You have to understand that the destruction of the Linton City fleet is a huge blow to Duke Ian. Moreover, he also lost the shipyard that he was proud of under the attack of the pirates. His strength has declined greatly, and it's not surprising that others are spying on him. Duke Georgie and Duke Alexander also lost a lot in this turmoil, and they need to find a prey to make up for their losses. Unfortunately, Duke Ian became the prey. Please be prepared. If nothing goes wrong, the Lockett family will be removed from the list. In the cruel political struggle, if you don't know when to advance and when to retreat, it won't be long before you die without a burial place." After saying that, Andre forked a piece of delicious and juicy fried beef into his mouth. He did not eat much at the banquet, and his stomach was already rumbling with hunger. Now that he was home, he naturally had to make up for it. You're right. Families that don't know when to advance or retreat usually don't have a good ending. I just didn't expect that in just a few months, there would be 2 noble families with a long history that are about to die out. The Countess, who had recovered from her shock, could not help but lament. As a member of the noble class, she could not help but feel sad when she heard such news. Chapter 956. After a simple night's rest in Countess Anastasia's mansion, Andre left Linton City with his followers in a carriage the next morning, arriving at the castle in Tulsi Valley by noon. Abner, the head of internal affairs, had been notified in advance and was waiting at the gate with a large group of servants, slaves, and soldiers. Seeing the person he was loyal to walk out of the carriage, he quickly stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Welcome back, my lord. I've already asked the chef to prepare a sumptuous lunch according to your taste. I guarantee it will be clean and delicious." "Thank you, my dear head steward. You're always so capable. You've arranged everything well." Andre smiled and nodded in praise. As a former manager, he knew very well how much energy it took to take care of a territory with a population of tens of thousands of people. It was especially so when one had to repeat the same boring work every day. It was simply not fun at all. Abner shook his head humbly. "No, you're too kind. It's all thanks to the knowledge of agriculture and animal husbandry that you left behind. Otherwise, no matter how hard I worked, I wouldn't have been able to make the entire territory so prosperous in just half a year. Perhaps you're still not aware, but ever since the news of the first harvest of rice spread out, we've already captured at least 12 spies sent by the surrounding nobles." 12? Wow, that's quite a number. Andre purposely made an exaggerated expression. One had to know that the only way into the valley was through the heavily guarded castle. He really didn't know whether to praise those greedy nobles for their audacity or laugh at their low intelligence. After all, even a professional thief would find it difficult to avoid the pursuit of a large group of hounds. Coincidentally, there were at least 30 ferocious dogs in the castle, and more than half of them had the bloodline of the Krar hounds. They were all true killers. Once they noticed something amiss, they would immediately swarm over and tear the intruder to pieces. Andre didn't even need to think to know how miserable the fate of these spies would be. Not even a complete corpse would be left behind. Haha, thanks to them, I've saved a lot of dog food. Abner smiled and told the bloody truth. It was obvious that he had fed those unlucky spies to the dogs. Now all that was left was a pile of bones. Don't think this is strange. In order to keep the hounds aggressive, the nobles often fed them living people. Sometimes it was servants who made mistakes, and sometimes it was poachers who were unlucky enough to be caught. Imagining the bloody scene of the hounds tearing a living person apart, Andre quickly shook his head and forced himself to forget the scene just now. He continued to ask, "What about other aspects? For example, our food reserves, profitability, the number of herds, and so on. In addition, how are the slaves eating? Are they starving?" Abner, who knew the territory like the back of his hand, reported without hesitation, "My lord, as per your orders, we have sold most of our food to Linton City to help the dukes stabilize the soaring prices. That's why we don't have much food left, just enough for daily consumption and a professional army of 1,500 men. Their profits were also very good. When they sold the food, the dukes gave them a good price. Furthermore, the chickens, ducks, and geese you raise lay thousands of eggs every day. Some of them are salted, while the rest are sent to the city to be sold. The profits are quite good. In addition, due to the large number of cattle, sheep, and horses, dairy products are also an important source of income. Cheese in particular is not only delicious, but also provides a lot of nutrients for the body. Half of it is sold, and the other half is stored as military rations. As for the last source of income, it's soy products including oil, dregs, dried tofu, bean cakes, and so on. I have to say, your use of soy is simply amazing. I never knew that something that could only be used to feed animals could be processed in so many different types of products. The taste is also very good. As per your orders, the remaining dregs are mixed with hay and wheat straw, and they're poured into pots to be cooked, becoming fodder for the pigs, cows, sheep, chickens, ducks, and geese. We currently have about 360 pigs in captivity. They've all been castrated and look fat and strong, ready to be slaughtered at any time. Most of the tenants and slaves in our territory usually eat seaweed and tofu soup, and the staple food is rice porridge cut into small pieces after cooling down. If conditions permit, I'll even hire a few fishing boats to catch some small fish near the coast and fry them, giving each person 3 to 5 fish. They now regard you as the most respected and loved person in their lives, and have a strong sense of belonging to the territory. After lunch, I'll take you around, and you'll find out your position in the hearts of the people. All in all, your territory is incomparably rich. Even the lowliest slave doesn't have to suffer from hunger or cold. I dare to swear on my honor that there's no territory in the entire southern region that can compare to this. After listening to this long series of reports mixed with flattery, Andre basically had a general understanding of his territory. To sum it up in a simple sentence, it was barely enough to satisfy the basic needs of the people. Perhaps the innovation of agricultural technology and the planting of new crops had multiplied the output of the land, but most of the tenants' income still had to be turned over to the Lord. Needless to say, the slaves were even part of the master's property, not to mention any income. In fact, Andre had reduced the tax ratio to the lowest 5 in order to let the commoners live a little better, because any further reduction would arouse the hostility of the surrounding lords. In other words, as long as the tenants paid half of their income to the Lord, they could peacefully enjoy the other half at home. Note that this half included more than 90% of the tax, including the poll tax. Once the tax was paid, there was no need to pay any other miscellaneous taxes. For example, entry tax, any tax, poll tax, inheritance tax, and so on. Generally speaking, the lords wouldn't stop until they had robbed the tenants of their last bit of property. Of course, if anyone in the territory wanted to get married, they would still have to pay the marriage tax. After all, this represented the supreme privilege of the Lord, and unless they wanted to challenge the entire noble class, they would have to obediently accept it. Andre simply couldn't imagine how the peasants could survive with so many kinds of oppression. If he hadn't become a mountain person who didn't have to pay taxes when he transmigrated, he would have already become a vanguard to overthrow the feudal rule. Chapter 9:57. Heavy taxes had always been the biggest obstacle that limited the growth of Aurare's population. At the same time, it was a heavy shackle that prevented the economy, society, and culture from advancing for thousands of years. None of the lords realized that from a long-term point of view, this kind of tyrannical behavior would actually harm their own interests in the end. After all, population was the cornerstone of all civilizations. Without sufficient population, there would be insufficient labor force. Without sufficient labor force, there would be insufficient surplus value. Without sufficient surplus value, there would be no way to promote the dual prosperity of commerce and the economy. The extremely backward economy and commerce led to the low income of the lords, which in turn led to the lords crazily oppressing their tenants and serfs in their own territories. Due to this, the peasants did not have enough food to raise their offspring. To a certain extent, this was a terrifying infinite loop. Just think about it. When most of the territories only had a few thousand to a few tens of thousands of people, what could the lords do? In fact, they could not do anything. They could only barely maintain their rule. Not to mention promoting reforms. Even a small-scale natural disaster could lead to extremely serious consequences. When faced with a large-scale disaster, the first reaction of the nobles was often not to provide relief to the victims, but to recruit all the elites in their territories into the army and attack the surrounding areas that were not affected by the disaster. They used slaughter and plunder to obtain the food they desperately needed. This was because regardless of whether they succeeded or failed, the nobles could achieve the goal of stabilizing their rule through war. If they succeeded, they could obtain enough food and wealth. But if they failed, they could also greatly reduce the population that could not be fed and prevent the starving victims from escaping and causing unrest in their territories. Therefore, war was a common occurrence throughout the entire continent. There were wars almost every year, every month, and every day. Sometimes it was war between countries, sometimes it was the private grudges of the nobles, and sometimes it was against the goblins, orcs, half-orcs, kobolds, and other monsters. It was these wars that ensured the stability of the feudal system for thousands of years. There was no power that could threaten it at all. Andre shook his head helplessly as he secretly lamented the bitter lives of the peasants and tenants in this world. Reform was never something that could be done overnight. He could only do so much at the moment. As for the rest, he would wait until the time was right to do it. After all, this kind of problem related to the basic social structure. Unless it was absolutely necessary, it was best not to use violence to carry it out. Otherwise, it would definitely trigger even greater conflicts. Abner seemed to have sensed his master's displeasure and hurriedly asked cautiously, "Sir, is there anything wrong with my work?" Andre gently waved his hand. "No, you've done well. Much better than I expected. However, there's always been an idea in my mind. It's about business. But if we want to put this idea into practice, we have to increase the purchasing power of the people, which is to let them have enough money on hand. Do you have any good suggestions in this regard? Make the tenants rich? Are you sure you didn't make a mistake?" The chief of internal affairs opened his mouth wide in shock. He was obviously shocked to the extreme. Even in his wildest dreams, he didn't dare to believe that he would one day hear such deviant words from the mouth of a feudal lord. In many traditional views, keeping the tenants and peasants poor was a necessary means to maintain the dignity and status of the nobles. This was because only those bumpkins who were so poor that they would feel a sense of inferiority when they saw the nobles' majestic castles, luxurious clothing, and luxurious food. This inferiority would become a powerful tool of governance. Yes, I'm very sure. In my plan, the slaves in the territory will be released in batches and eventually all become commoners. They will have their own property and land. Andre didn't hide anything and directly spoke his thoughts. "Sir, I don't recommend that you release the slaves on a large scale because this will greatly increase the cost of operation. Can you tell me more about your business idea?" Although Abner wanted to raise objections to this whimsical plan at the first moment, he ultimately held back. The reason was simple. He didn't want to question the authority of the feudal lord in front of so many outsiders. Instead, he planned to persuade Andre with his eloquence. As a smart person, Andre immediately saw through the chief of internal affairs' thoughts. He smiled and nodded. "No problem. But before we get to the main topic, do you know how profits are generated in all business activities?" Abner lowered his head and pondered for a few seconds. Then he quickly replied, "It's demand, my lord. Only when people have a demand will they be willing to spend money to buy a certain product. This is also why food, salt, cloth, and other necessities have always occupied a large share of the trade." "That's right. What you said is simply amazing. Demand is the foundation of all business activities. Then tell me, is a person's demand directly proportional to his income?" Andre gradually guided Abner's thoughts. He knew very well that it would be difficult to make a stubborn and traditional chief of internal affairs accept a new economic concept, so he didn't explain it directly. Instead, he let Abner understand it himself. This time, Abner took even less time to think. A second later, he answered affirmatively, "Yes, a person's demand is directly proportional to his income, because only when a person's income reaches a certain level will they consider how to enjoy life, collect art, appreciate poetry, and play." "Very good. It seems that you have understood the truth that the need for survival is greater than the need for spiritual needs. Then, one last question. If farmers and tenants have money in hand, will they also want to buy some luxury goods and experience the life of a noble? Once there was demand, would merchants flock here to sell their goods? With countless merchants, won't the business tax increase substantially?" As a series of questions came out of Abner's mouth, he instantly realized the point that Andre was trying to make. His eyes widened as he muttered to himself, "So that's how it is? So that's how it is. You want to increase the income of your subjects so that they can afford to buy more goods and attract more merchants. You want to use commercial taxes to replace agricultural taxes. This way, not only will you gain the gratitude of your subjects, you will also gain a prosperous trading town." "Ha ha, my dear chief, It seems that you accept new knowledge very quickly. Actually, the traditional idea of frantically plundering wealth and then burying it in a vault is wrong. Things like money will only become more abundant when it is circulated. Andre laughed and patted Abner's shoulder, stating an eternal truth in the field of economics. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.